Chapter 1136, Crippled. Chapter 1136, Crippled. North Region Dao Meet. Su Zimo's expression was calm when he heard that. He did not have much of a reaction and merely murmured softly. Nian Qi continued, "It's a gathering where void reversion Dao beings and Dharma-characteristic Dao lords of the North Region spar, interact, and even trade. I heard that it's also to prepare for the fight for the Dharma-characteristic ranking in the near future. For cultivators, such a grand event was definitely a rare opportunity. As long as they participated in the event, even if they did not spar, they could watch from the sidelines and familiarize themselves with the dharmic arts of other cultivators. If they could spar, verify, and interact with one another, their understanding of heaven and earth and dharmic arts would be deeper. Some cultivators might be stuck at bottlenecks for hundreds or even thousands of years without any breakthroughs. However, in this event, they might be enlightened with a single sentence from others and find an opportunity to break through. Furthermore, void reversion Dao beings and Dharma-characteristic Dao lords of the North Region would also be gathered at such a grand event. In reality, this event was a rare marketplace. Some cultivators might need treasures or materials that other cultivators might have. Both parties could trade items for treasures. Will there be cultivators of Glass Palace? After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo suddenly asked. I think so, Nian Qi said. Even though Glass Palace is one of the immortal sects, they shouldn't want to miss such a rare event. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes with a cold glint. There was something that lingered in his heart. Dao being Qian Yu of Glass Palace, the culprit behind the destruction of the 13 cities of Yin country. Back at the Great Qian ruins, Dao being Qian Yu was the one that shattered Su Zimo's golden core and forced him to leap into Dragon Burial Valley. Dao being Qian Yu was also the one that snatched away the treasure that little fox guarded with her life, the fire-blocking basket. The feud between the two of them was extremely deep. The feud between Su Zimo and Glass Palace was also caused by Dao being Qian Yu. There would definitely be a fight to the death between the two of them. Qian Yu. Now that more than 100 years have passed, I wonder if I should refer to you as a Dao being or Dao Lord. Su Zimo murmured softly with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. After more than 100 years, Qian Yu might still be a void reversion. Of course, there was also a chance that he might have already entered the Dharma-characteristic realm and became a Dharma-characteristic Dao Lord. No matter if he was a void reversion or Dharma-characteristic, there was a high chance that Qian Yu would partake in the North Region Dao Meet. That was because the North Region Dao Meet was a grand event specially prepared for void reversions and Dharma-characteristic Dao Lords. Right then, two figures appeared in the distance and sped over on clouds. They arrived in the blink of an eye. One of them wore a black robe and had a sharp expression. His eyes were deep and his expression was cold. It was Night Spirit. The other person was tall and burly with a head of golden hair that was curled. His beard was also golden in color and was connected to his hair. That person had his chest bared and there was a lot of fur on it. He looked extremely rough. Su Zimo was stunned for a moment when he caught sight of the golden-haired man. He was overjoyed and could not help but laugh. 7. Long time no see. The golden-haired man was none other than the golden lion that was sworn siblings with Su Zimo, Night Spirit, and the others. The golden lion was ranked last among the 7 sworn siblings, number 7. He was also equally excited when he saw Su Zimo. First, the two of them dispersed their clouds and descended as the golden lion shouted. Su Zimo went forward and punched the golden lion on the chest. He scolded jokingly, "You sure are happy on your own with your lover. You haven't seen your brothers for more than 100 years now." Back in Myriad Phenomenon City, Su Zimo and the others planned to head to Thousand Demon Valley. However, the golden lion was worried about its lover and decided to return to the Berserk Lion Ridge of the North Region. The separation between the 7 siblings lasted for more than 100 years. I remember it too. Night Spirit was delighted in this meeting between brothers as well and added a rare, teasing quip. What was her name? Cuckoo. She was very nice to you? Heh. The golden lion lowered its head slightly and rubbed its furry palms, smiling embarrassedly. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. Others might not be able to tell, but he could vaguely sense that something was bothering the golden lion. At the very least, the golden lion did not have the same old expression at the mention of Cuckoo. On the contrary, there was a hint of pain, anger, and helplessness in the golden lion's eyes. Of course, that gaze flashed by. Coupled with the fact that the golden lion had lowered its head, Suzimo did not manage to see clearly. He was filled with joy after reuniting with his brother after a long time and did not think too much about it. "Why are you guys together?" Suzimo asked with a smile. "I was bored in the capital, so I came here to take a look," Night Spirit said. "To think that I would sense someone spying nearby the moment I arrived outside Ethereal Peak." When he heard that, Suzimo laughed. There were not many people in this world who could hide from Night Spirit's senses. Even the hidden Death Sect disciples who were best at concealment could not do it. Pointing at the golden lion, Night Spirit continued, "I walked over secretly and saw him. If not for his yellow fur, I would have killed him." This was no joke. It was way too easy for Night Spirit to kill someone silently. Foo-foo. The golden lion chuckled foolishly. Night Spirit appeared suddenly like a ghost and gave me a fright. "You still have the cheek to say that?" Night Spirit said. "You stood in the forest in a daze, lost in thought. What were you thinking about?" "I'm fine." Rubbing his hands, the golden lion lowered his head subconsciously and said in a much lower voice, "Nothing much." This time round, Suzimo was not the only one. Even Night Spirit and Yin Qi noticed something amiss with the golden lion. The three of them exchanged glances without saying anything. When Suzimo saw that the golden lion was travel-worn and looked tired, he patted the latter on the shoulder. "Let's go. Don't just stand here. Come into the cave abode and sit down. Let's drink and talk." "Yes?" The golden lion nodded. The four of them headed towards the cave abode. After taking a few steps, Suzimo's heart skipped a beat and he glanced sideways. Previously, none of them noticed anything when the golden lion rode on his auspicious cloud. However, as they walked, he noticed that the golden lion's footsteps were not nimble. They were deep and shallow. Although the golden lion was intentionally restraining himself, his leg was clearly crippled. Night Spirit noticed it as well and exclaimed softly. Almost at the same time, Suzimo and Night Spirit stopped in their tracks and turned around. Both of them had stern expressions as they looked at the golden lion with bright eyes. "What's going on?" Suzimo asked coldly. The golden lion grit its teeth as though it wanted to say something. However, after hesitating for a long time, it sighed and lowered its head. Chapter 1137, Yuwen Wushuang. Chapter 1137, Yuwen Wushuang. "It's nothing much." The golden lion lowered his head and wanted to continue forward, but Suzimo grabbed him. "What's going on?" He glared at the golden lion, and his tone turned heavier. The golden lion did not dare to meet Suzimo's gaze and merely said in a low, muffled voice, "I merely lost a fight against someone because I'm weaker." Although the golden lion's words were simple, Suzimo knew that there must be more to it than meets the eye. Otherwise, the golden lion would not have such an expression. In the depths of his eyes, he was conflicted and clearly had something on his mind. Who did it? Night Spirit's gaze was cold and his tone was murderous. Ever since Night Spirit was born in Ethereal Peak, he had no clansmen. He had always viewed Suzimo and the others as his kin. Although the golden lion only knew him later on, they had fought side by side before and were sworn brothers. Now that the golden lion was severely injured, Night Spirit's killing intent was triggered. At their cultivation realm, coupled with the fact that the golden lion was a pure-blooded ferocious beast with a powerful bloodline, his regeneration capabilities were shocking. Even if someone broke his leg, he would recover after resting for a period of time. But now, the golden lion was limping and was already crippled. One could imagine how badly his leg was injured back then. The golden lion hung his head slightly in silence. However, Suzimo and the others could tell the struggle in the golden lion's eyes. "7. What are you afraid of? What can't you say?" Frowning, Night Spirit asked again. It's not that I can't say it. It's useless even if I do. The golden lion laughed bitterly. I know that you guys want to help me, but let's forget about this matter. Are you afraid of implicating us? Suzimo raised his brow. Tell me first, who is the other party and what is his background? The golden lion hesitated for a moment. When he thought of that person, endless rage surged in his eyes. Finally, he could not hold it in any longer and grit his teeth. He's from the Yuwen clan. Yuwen clan? Suzimo's expression was indifferent. Yuwen of the 4 gentry cultivation clans? In the North region, there were 4 gentry clans that were comparable to the 10 upper sects of the North region. They were strong and had deep foundations. During the fight at the Great Qian ruins, Suzimo had interacted with these sects and factions. That's right. The golden lion nodded and said hatefully, Cuckoo and I stayed in Wild Lion Ridge for 100 years peacefully. 10 years ago, I heard about the news of First in the Middle Continent's Thousand Crane Tea Party. Because I missed you guys, I discussed with Cuckoo and we prepared to head to the Middle Continent to look for you guys. However, not long after we left the Wild Lion Ridge, we encountered that person, Yuwen Wushuang. At the mention of this person, besides anger and hatred, there was also fear and helplessness in the Golden Lion's eyes. Cuckoo is a variant of the Golden Lion clan and is special with an entirely pure gold body. When Yuwen Wushuang caught sight of Cuckoo, he had thoughts of taking her as his mount. The Golden Lion paused for a moment and sighed softly. He's too strong. Although we were both at the Void Reversion Realm, we lasted less than 10 moves against him despite our combined strength. At that point, Suzimo and Night Spirit looked calm. Void reversions were no longer a threat to them. Nianqi said naturally, there's no need to worry about void reversions. With young master around, we can snatch Cuckoo back at any time. The golden lion laughed bitterly again, shaking his head and saying, You all didn't fight him, so you don't know how powerful he is. If First hadn't been crippled by a half-martial ancestor, he might be able to win over him. Now that First has lost his physique and utmost treasures like the Divine Phoenix Bone and Creation Green Lotus, he's definitely no match for him. During the battle at the capital of Great Zhou, the cultivators of the 3 dynasties either died or were injured. Those who survived had already submitted to Ji Yaoxue. In the Battle of Ethereal Peak, all the cultivators of Dragon Tiger sect were wiped out. These 2 battles were not seen by outsiders. The cultivators of the North region had only received some vague news and knew that Dao being Desolate Marshal had returned. However, not many people knew the details of the 2 battles. The outside world still thought that Dao being Desolate Marshal had fallen from grace and was now no different from the masses. Even the Golden Lion felt the same way. After all, many cultivators had witnessed a half-martial ancestor crippling his body and shattering his creation Green Lotus. The Golden Lion said, This Yuwen Wushuang is known as the #1 genius in the history of the Yuwen clan. His talent is heaven-defying, and he is blessed with luck. He has obtained countless immortal encounters and is known as the #1 Dao being in the North region. Oh, in that case, he does have some ability. Suzimo nodded and said indifferently. One of the immortal sects, Glass Palace, was located in the North region. The fact that Yuwen Wushuang could be called the #1 Dao being in the North region meant that his combat strength surpassed many of Glass Palace's successors. This was indeed not easy. However, those titles were nothing to Suzimo, who were the void reversions that died in his hands 10 years ago. They were the titular disciples of the super sects. What happened to Dian, whom people claimed was comparable to the human emperor? No matter how strong Yuwen Wushuang was, could he compare to Dian? Suzimo did not explain and asked again, What happened after that? He broke your legs after abducting Cuckoo? No. The Golden Lion shook his head. Back then, I was severely injured and nearly lost my life. Thankfully, a treasure I obtained in the ancient battlefield saved my life. When I woke up, Yuwen Wushuang had already left. Half a year later, I recovered from my injuries and snuck into the Yuwen clan. However, Yuwen Wushuang saw me and suppressed me. If Cuckoo hadn't pleaded for me, I would have died 9 years ago. At the mention of this, The golden lion's eyes still carried indescribable pain. Not many people would be able to bear watching their beloved plead for them in front of their enemies. The golden lion gritted his teeth and said, Yuwen Wushuang said that while I can avoid death, I can't avoid punishment. In order to teach me a lesson, he broke all the bones in my right leg and crushed them into fingernail-sized pieces. He even cut my hamstring into pieces. At this point, the golden lion's voice was trembling. His eyes were bloodshot and his expression was filled with hatred, as though he had returned to that night 9 years ago. He would never be able to forget how Yuwen Wushuang had stepped on him and looked down at him from above. He would never be able to forget the disdain and ridicule in Yuwen Wushuang's eyes. He would never be able to forget Yuwen Wushuang's devilish voice. Little lion, I want you to remember forever not to provoke me. This time, I will only cripple one of your legs as a reminder. Next time, I will break all the bones in your body piece by piece. He would never be able to forget how Cuckoo knelt beside Yuwen Wushuang's feet and wept loudly, begging for forgiveness. This scene was like a sharp blade that was stabbed into his chest. The pain was unbearable. The 9 years of heart-wrenching pain tortured this heroic man until he was afraid of everything. He no longer had the spirit he had in the past. Nian Qi's eyes were red as she turned her head away, unable to bear to look at the golden lion. With a cold expression, Su Zimo patted the golden lion's arm gently and said in an icy voice, Stop talking. We're leaving tomorrow. Follow me to the North Region Dao Meet. Chapter 1138, Chance Encounter. Chapter 1138, Chance Encounter. Early the next morning, Su Zimo and the others bade farewell to the old immortal crane and left Ethereal Peak. There were not many people in their group for this trip. There was only Su Zimo, Night Spirit, the Golden Lion, and Nian Qi. Actually, Su Zimo did not intend to bring Nian Qi along. However, he could not withstand her coaxing and pestering. On second thought, Nian Qi had half of the god race's bloodline after all. Now that she had stepped into the void reversion realm, she should be able to protect herself against Dharma-characteristic Dao Lords. Furthermore, there was still him and Night Spirit. They boarded a spirit vessel controlled by Night Spirit and soon disappeared from Ethereal Peak. Not long after he left, the Golden Lion felt a little uneasy. First, Night Spirit, I know that you guys want to help me and can't take this lying down. However, there are many experts gathered at the North Region Dao Meet. You guys can't risk your lives for me. The Golden Lion said with a troubled expression, Yuwen Wushuang is backed by the Yuwen clan, which is on good terms with other sects and factions. The 4 of us have no chance of winning. Furthermore, I heard that there will be many Dharma-characteristic Dao Lords gathered at the North Region Dao Meet. Let's not go. 7. Why have you become so timid? Night Spirit teased. The Golden Lion's face turned red, quickly arguing, It's not that I'm timid. It's nothing even if I lose my life. However, I'm worried about implicating you guys. Don't think too much. Su Zimo waved his hand. I'm not going to the North Region Dao Meet just for you. I have other things to do. Ah. The Golden Lion was stunned. Su Zimo explained. The cultivators of Dragon Tiger sect interfered in the Witch Goo calamity a year ago. They haven't been accountable for that matter just yet. Also, I have a deep grudge against Dao being Qian Yu of Glass Palace. I'm going to see if I can bump into him. Even if you weren't involved, I'd still head to the North Region Dao Meet. The Golden Lion seemed to be still worried and said, First, you must be careful when we arrive at the North Region Dao Meet. Don't be reckless. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Su Zimo smiled calmly. After pondering for a moment, the Golden Lion reverted to his true form on the spirit vessel. He shrank continuously until he was almost half a person tall. The originally majestic and ferocious Golden Lion now looked like a harmless pet. The reason why the Golden Lion did this was because he was worried he might bring Su Zimo unnecessary trouble. That was because after cultivating to fiend demons, they could take on human form and it was difficult for cultivators to see through their flaws. Therefore, in the cultivation world, if fiend demons were discovered in human form, they would be surrounded and killed by cultivators immediately. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying it was to have a fiend demon in human form sandwiched between many cultivators. All the cultivators would subconsciously assume that this fiend demon had ulterior motives. If a fiend demon were to transform into his true form and shrink to the size of a pet, other cultivators would know that the fiend demon was a cultivator's mount or spirit pet. If it was 10 years ago, the golden lion would not have cared about such minor details. Suzimo would not have minded either. However, the golden lion had experienced too much in the past 10 years and had become extremely cautious. He was afraid that Suzimo and Night Spirit would suffer a calamity because of him and leave his side just like Cuckoo. Night Spirit opened his mouth slightly, as though he wanted to say something but held it back. Both he and Suzimo knew that the golden lion had already developed a knot in its heart. Even if others tried to persuade it, it would be useless. The only way to resolve this mental knot was through Yuwen Wushuang. Night Spirit controlled the spirit vessel and sped for an entire day and night before leaving the territory of Great Zhou. After the Great Zhou dynasty annexed the Great Xia, Great Shang, and Great Yu dynasties, its territory was many times larger than before. Of course, the Great Zhou dynasty was far from being able to be called an empire. Its strength was far inferior compared to the Great Qian Empire 10,000 years ago. That was because there were no super sects in the territory of Great Zhou. Not to mention super sects, there weren't even any factions like the 10 upper sects, aristocratic families, or gentry clans. In the past, there were 2 super sects in the Great Qian Empire. To be called an empire, one had to possess absolute dominance in a major region. The Great Zhou dynasty was far from that. The moment the spirit vessel left the territory of Great Zhou, a spirit vessel appeared not far away from them. It was leaving Great Zhou as well and sped alongside the spirit vessel of Suzimo and the others. The spirit vessel was majestic and domineering. It was clearly extraordinary. Compared to the spirit vessel opposite, the spirit vessel that Suzimo and the others sat on was much more simple and crude. Suzimo's gaze shifted to the gigantic spirit vessel opposite him. There were 6 people at the bow, 3 youngsters, 2 male and 1 female. Behind the 3 youngsters were 2 middle-aged men. The gigantic spirit vessel was controlled by another old man in plain clothes. The old man looked ordinary. However, Suzimo was sharp and experienced. He had interacted with cultivators like that too many times. Even without using his spirit consciousness, he could sense that the old man was a Dharma-characteristic Tao Lord. It was not only the old man. Even the 2 middle-aged men behind the 3 youngsters were Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords. It was quite rare to meet 3 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords in this vicinity. Suzimo thought of something and narrowed his eyes. His gaze landed on the 3 youngsters. There were 2 men and 1 woman. The 2 men were at the nascent soul realm, while the woman was at the void reversion realm. Wearing brocade robes, the 2 men were handsome and looked extremely noble. The woman in the middle was beautiful and dignified. She wore a moon-white Tao robe and was tall with a voluptuous figure. Her black hair was like ink that hung down her head and swayed gently. A few strands of black hair brushed past that elegant and refined face, contrasting her pensive expression. The 3 of them had unique auras, and Suzimo already had a guess about their backgrounds. At that moment, the 6 people on the gigantic spirit vessel noticed Suzimo as well. The old man was focused on the spirit vessel the entire time and did not turn back. The 2 Dharma-characteristic middle-aged men merely glanced at Suzimo and the others. When they realized that they were only void reversions, they did not pay much attention and retracted their gazes. On the other hand, the beautiful woman's gaze lingered. Her eyes swept past Suzimo's group of 4 before landing on him. Turning around, she cupped her fist with a smile and asked loudly, "Fellow Taoist, where are you going?" "North Region Tao Meet," Suzimo replied. "Ah." The beautiful woman chuckled and invited with a sincere expression, "That's great. We're going to the North Region Tao Meet as well. Why don't we travel together? How about taking a seat on our vessel?" Night Spirit pouted in disapproval. The 4 of them were close and naturally did not want to bother about strangers. Knight's spirit had just opened his mouth and was about to reject when Su Zimo laughed and agreed readily. Sure. A look of doubt flashed through the eyes of Knight's spirit and the other two. This did not seem like Su Zimo's style. However, the three of them realized that there must be a reason for this and decided to wait and see. Chapter 1139. This person isn't simple. Chapter 1139. This person isn't simple. Su Zimo's group of 4 descended on the gigantic spirit vessel. The spirit vessel was extremely sturdy, and there were many formation patterns etched on its surface. It was obvious that it was created by a master. It was even more classy on the spirit vessel, where many of the structures were made of pure gold. On the bow was a sandalwood table with many spirit fruits and immortal peaches on it. There was even a steaming pot of fragrant tea. Fellow Taoist, please take a seat. The beautiful woman did not look at anyone else and merely extended an invitation to Su Zimo. She knew what was going on. Although this was just their first meeting, she could roughly guess the hierarchy between the 4 of them. Among the 4 of them, the green-robed cultivator was clearly the leader. Although the golden-haired girl behind the green-robed cultivator was good-looking, she followed the green-robed cultivator the entire time and was half in status beneath him. She should be a maidservant. That golden lion should be the green-robed cultivator's spirit pet or mount. The golden lion was a pure-blooded, ferocious beast. Not everyone could subdue a golden lion of the void reversion realm. As for the black-robed man, there was a high chance that he was also a servant, since he was the one controlling the spirit vessel previously. In the cultivation world, it was normal to have some servants at the void reversion realm. After all, it was impossible for void reversions to cultivate spirit herbs, raise spirit beasts, or deal with trivial matters personally. In reality, although her guess was a little different, she was not wrong in her judgment. Indeed, Su Zimo was the leader of the 4. Su Zimo did not decline and sat down. He looked around and praised, "Fellow Taoist, this spirit vessel is truly not bad." He sat there and enjoyed the warm breeze, eating immortal fruits and drinking hot tea. He enjoyed the scenery of the majestic mountains and rivers. When the 2 men saw Su Zimo's expression, a look of disdain flashed through their eyes. I wonder where this country bumpkin came from. How did he manage to cultivate to the void reversion realm if he had never even seen a spirit vessel as such before? Both of them sneered internally. Despite their contempt, the 2 of them did not care much and sat down without saying anything. To be fair, both of them were at the nascent soul realm, and it was somewhat abrupt for them to sit together with a void reversion. The beautiful woman frowned slightly, but did not say anything. Naturally, Su Zimo could not be bothered. The same way the beautiful woman sized up the 4 of them, he had long seen through the group of them as well. Although the 3 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords had the highest cultivation, their status was beneath the 3 youngsters. Among the 3 youngsters, the 2 men were clearly more simple-minded and looked like playboys from the royal family. The woman before him was elegant and dignified with an outstanding aura. "How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" the beautiful woman asked with a smile. Su Zimo replied, "My surname is Su." The beautiful woman was stunned for a moment before feeling relieved. In the cultivation world, it was normal for strangers to not tell each other their full or real names. After all, one had to be wary of others. The beautiful woman was tactful and did not continue asking. She merely raised a cup of fragrant tea and said with a smile, "I'm Yuwen, Brother Su. It's fate that I was able to meet you here in the North region. Here, I'll use tea as a replacement for wine and offer you a toast." Unknowingly, the woman called Yuwen changed her way of addressing Su Zimo, from fellow Taoist to Brother Su. The distance between the 2 of them seemed to have closed up as well. "You're welcome, fellow Taoist." Su Zimo replied indifferently. He raised his teacup and drank it in one gulp. Yuwen smiled and asked, "Brother Su, you have an extraordinary bearing. You must be from some major sect, right?" Although she seemed to be praising him, in reality, she was also trying to find out more about Su Zimo. "I'm just an itinerant cultivator," Suzimo shook his head and smiled. That was indeed the truth. 100 years ago, he had already left Ethereal Peak when he offended Glass Palace and traveled to the Middle Continent. Yulan stared at Suzimo with her beautiful eyes. When she saw that the latter was calm and did not seem to be faking it, she was slightly relieved. When the two men heard that Suzimo was an itinerant cultivator, their contempt intensified and they pursed their lips instinctively. The two men no longer paid attention to Suzimo. Instead, their gazes would drift behind Suzimo from time to time to look at the slender, golden-haired girl. There was a strange glint in their eyes. Glancing at Yulan, Suzimo suddenly asked, "Where are you from, fellow Taoist?" Yulan's expression was a little dejected as she shook her head and sighed. "My family fell and was destroyed by my enemies. Sigh, there's no point mentioning it." "Oh?" Suzimo asked curiously, "What enemies?" Yulan hesitated for a moment and looked into Suzimo's clear eyes. After a long time, she made up her mind and said slowly, "To be honest, I cough." Right then, a violent cough sounded from the bow of the vessel, interrupting Yulan. The old man who was initially controlling the spirit vessel stood up unsteadily and lamented, "I'm getting old. Sigh. My body can't take it anymore after controlling the spirit vessel for a while." He staggered towards them. Yulan stood up hurriedly with a concerned expression. "Sorry." She smiled apologetically at Suzimo, supported the old man and left the table, heading towards the cabin. Suzimo smiled faintly. The old man was a Dharma-characteristic Tao Lord. Although he was already in his twilight years, he was far from being this weak. The reason why that scene unfolded was because the old man did not want Yulan to continue. Yulan instantly understood the old man's intentions and supported him to leave temporarily. This sort of trick could be hidden from those who were inexperienced. For example, the two men in brocade robes at the table were gorging themselves and did not seem to have noticed anything. However, it was useless against Suzimo. He remained silent and observed the situation. The moment they returned to the cabin and closed the door, Yulan frowned and said softly, "Uncle Zhang, if there's anything, you can just send a voice transmission with your spirit consciousness. Why did you have to do this?" The old man straightened his back and regained his rosy complexion. He was hale and hearty and did not look old at all. Uncle Zhang shook his head. "Princess, please don't take offense. If I use a spirit consciousness transmission, there will definitely be spirit consciousness fluctuation. There's a chance that Lad might be able to sense it. There's an array formation in this cabin that can isolate spirit consciousness and sound. It's only safe to speak here." Yulan nodded and did not harp on this matter. She asked, "Why did you interrupt me, Uncle Zhang? We only met by chance with that person. Are you really going to reveal your background?" Uncle Zhang asked in a deep voice with a grim expression. Yulan nodded. Although fellow Taoist Su is at the Void Reversion Realm, he has an extraordinary bearing. If we can befriend him and gain his trust, it might be a great help to our revival. What can an itinerant cultivator at the Void Reversion Realm help us with? The old man did not think much of it. "Princess, don't think that he's so great just because he has a golden lion mount. I noticed that the golden lion is crippled. It's nothing special." "Uncle Zhang, believe me." Yulan had a resolute expression. "My judgment of people is not wrong. This person is not simple." Chapter 1140, Royalty of the Three Dynasties. Chapter 1140, Royalty of the Three Dynasties. On the bow. Not long after Yulan supported the old man and left, Night Spirit, whose head was initially lowered and was silent, flickered his eyes as though he sensed something. First, that Yulan person is a princess. Night Spirit used his spirit consciousness to send a voice transmission to Suzimo. There was indeed an array formation above the cabin that could isolate spirit consciousness and sound. In fact, even Suzimo could not hear the conversation between Yulan and the other person. However, Night Spirit could hear it. "Yes?" Suzimo replied without any surprise. "You knew about it long ago, first?" Night Spirit asked in surprise. Su Zimo smiled gently and sent a voice transmission. Yulan is a princess while the other two are princes. If I'm not wrong, the three of them should be from the Great Yu, Great Xia, and Great Shang dynasties. Ah! Night Spirit was even more surprised. Su Zimo explained, this spirit vessel is classy and graceful. It's filled with jewels and treasures. If you take a closer look, you'll see many features of the royal family. Furthermore, the way the three of them sit and walk is different from ordinary cultivators. Only those from the royal family would possess such characteristics. After pondering for a moment, Night Spirit came to a realization. When he saw the three of them, he felt that there was something familiar about them. It turned out that the three of them were similar to Ji Yaoxue in that they came from royalty. That's not all. Su Zimo continued, this spirit vessel came from the Great Zhou Dynasty's territory, and there are 3 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords on it. The only factions in the Great Zhou Dynasty that have 3 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords are the 3 Dynasties. Prior to this, he was already curious. Normally, the 3 Dynasties should have Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords guarding them. However, after the 3 Dynasties were destroyed, the 3 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords disappeared without a trace. To think that they had hidden themselves alongside the bloodline of the royal families of the 3 Dynasties. Right now, they seem to be heading to the North Region Tao meet with a motive. The 3 Dynasties were destroyed by the Great Zhou. To a certain extent, the bloodline of the 3 Dynasties posed a threat to Ji Yaoxue. First, should we? When Night Spirit knew of their identities, his tone suddenly turned sinister. Let's wait a little longer and see what plans they have. Su Zimo shook his head gently. If these people cultivated peacefully from now on and did not interfere in the fight between the dynasties, there was no need for him to kill them all. Su Zimo and Night Spirit were communicating through spirit consciousness. On the other side, the 2 princes were also communicating through their spirit consciousnesses. After a long time, they exchanged glances and revealed sinister smiles. Miss, stop standing. Come and sit as well. The slightly plump brocade-robed man narrowed his eyes and greeted with a chuckle, sizing Nian Qi up brazenly. Nian Qi merely glanced at that person indifferently without saying anything or moving. He was one of the princes of Great Shang and had seen countless women. However, those women were nothing compared to the girl before him. Not only was the prince not enraged by Nian Qi's cold and handsome appearance, he was even more tempted. Earlier on, he had already discussed with the Prince of Great Xia beside him on how to take down this girl. In the worst-case scenario, they would have the 2 imperial advisors kill the green-robed cultivator. The 2 imperial advisors were Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords after all, and stood right behind them. When the Prince of Great Xia saw that Nian Qi did not react, he chuckled and stood up. Extending his palm, he grabbed Nian Qi's wrist and said, "Don't be shy. Come and sit." Initially, Su Zimo was communicating through spirit consciousness with Night Spirit. The moment he caught sight of the Prince of Great Xia extending his arm, Su Zimo's gaze turned cold instantly. Right away, the temperature of the entire vessel dipped. The atmosphere seemed to have frozen. Initially, the 2 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords standing at the side merely frowned slightly at the sight. Suddenly, both of them shuddered and gasped. Pissed. The killing intent that the green-robed cultivator exuded made both of them shudder. If that was the case for Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords, it was even worse for the princes of Great Shang and Great Xia who were merely at the nascent soul realm and were weaker. Instantly, their bodies turned extremely stiff and their expressions froze as well. Their eyes were filled with shock and their hairs stood on end. It was as though they were about to face a calamity the next moment. Who was Su Zimo? How many people had he killed? What sort of people had he killed? Even ordinary void reversions would not be able to withstand his killing intent, let alone nascent souls. It was even possible for cowards to be scared to death on the spot. You better retract your claws. Su Zimo's gaze shifted to the Prince of Great Xia, and he said indifferently, "Unless you don't want them anymore." His tone was extremely calm. However, it sent chills down one's spine. Almost without hesitation, As though it was an instinct to avoid danger, the Prince of Great Xia retracted his arm and retreated a few steps, hiding behind a Dharma-characteristic Tao Lord. Cling, clang. The Prince of Great Shang stood up hurriedly. In his panic, he bumped into his seat and made a sound. His face was pale and his legs went limp. He nearly fell to the ground and scrambled to hide behind another Dharma-characteristic Tao Lord. I Imperial Advisor. He wants to kill me. The voice of the Prince of Great Shang trembled slightly with a shocked expression. The two Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords no longer cared about shame when they saw how useless their princes were. Both of them had grim expressions and fixed their gazes on Su Zimo. Fellow Taoist, what's the meaning of this? One of the Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords took a deep breath and composed himself once more, his gaze turning sharp. He was at the Dharma-characteristic realm after all. The green-robed cultivator before him was only at the void reversion realm. They might have been imagining things earlier on. What's wrong with that? Right then, not far away, the door of the cabin opened and Yuwen and the old man at the helm walked out, asking loudly. Initially, Yuwen was chatting with Uncle Zhang. However, she realized that something had happened at the bow of the vessel and hurried over. Yuwen, you came at the right time. The Prince of Great Xia mustered his courage and said, "This impertinent Su tried to rebel and actually wanted to kill us." Oh. Yulan's expression did not change as she asked, "Why did he try to kill you?" Because the Prince of Great Xia was stumped momentarily. It was way too embarrassing to mention that he harbored ill intentions towards the maidservant. The Prince of Great Shang braced himself and declared loudly, "No matter what, he has committed a grave sin by wanting to kill us. He deserves death." Get lost. Suddenly, Yuwen hollered with a dark expression and said coldly, "Return to the cabin and stay there obediently. Don't come out and embarrass yourself." The Prince of Great Shang shrank his neck and did not dare to make a sound. However, the Prince of Great Xia had an indignant expression as he turned around. Imperial Advisor, she? The Dharma-characteristic Tao Lord sighed. You guys should head back and reflect on yourself. Upon hearing that, the two princes felt their hearts turn cold. They could only grit their teeth and swallow their anger before turning to leave. Chapter 1141, Powerful Sixth Sense. Chapter 1141, Powerful Sixth Sense. The two princes were indignant. However, they did not know that if Yuwen had not asked them to leave, they would have been two corpses by now. If the two imperial advisors wanted to protect them, they would die along with them. Brother Su, I'm sorry. Yuwen revealed an apologetic expression and bowed towards Su Zimo, saying sincerely, "No matter how they offended you earlier on, I'll apologize to you here." It was out of Su Zimo's expectations that Yuwen would do something like that given her status as a princess. They had only met by chance to think that Yuwen would stand on his side and even offend the two princes. Initially, he had intended to make use of this incident to start a massacre. Now that Yuwen was like that, it was not convenient for him to make a move. Su Zimo nodded without saying anything more. The imperial advisors of Great Shang and Great Xia exchanged glances and lamented internally. Their two princes were royalty as well. However, compared to Princess Yuwen, they were like dung. Faced with the same situation of their dynasty's destruction, the Princess of Great Yu before them was trying her best to befriend various major sects, factions, and paragons so that she can revive her dynasty. However, their princes were merely thinking about women. The two imperial advisors had already decided that if the trip to the North Region Dao meet resulted in a successful revival of their dynasties, they would follow Princess Yuwen. In their opinion, Princess Yuwen, who was similarly a woman, was no weaker than the current Empress of Great Zhou. The reason why the Empress of Great Zhou could gain her current achievements was all because of that Dao being desolate marshal. Uncle Zhang continued to steer the spirit vessel forward. Yuwen sat back down and pondered for a moment before saying, "To be honest, I'm a princess of the Great Yu dynasty. Those two are princes of the Great Xia and Great Shang dynasties." After saying that, Yulan paused for a moment and looked into Su Zimo's eyes. The two imperial advisors standing behind her felt their hearts skip a beat as they glared at Su Zimo, wanting to see how the latter would react. Unfortunately, they were disappointed. Su Zimo's expression was calm, and his eyes were deep without any emotions. It was as though the title of prince and princess was no different from any other mortal in the eyes of the green-robed cultivator. How could this be? Could it be that this green-robed cultivator had not even heard of the 4 dynasties of the North region? The two imperial advisors muttered internally. Right then, Su Zimo said indifferently, "From what I know, the 3 dynasties of Great Shang, Great Xia and Great Yu have already been destroyed." When Yulan saw that Su Zimo did not show any hostility, she was relieved. Yes. She let out a bitter laugh and sighed gently. It coincidentally happened when our dynasty was down on our luck, as fate would dictate. After a brief pause, Yulan's gaze turned resolute once more. However, I'm indignant. I'm not willing to lose to the Empress of Great Zhou. I want to revive my dynasty. Revive your dynasty? Su Zimo raised his brow. Yulan nodded heavily. The reason why the Great Zhou dynasty is in such a state today is not because of how strong they are. It's just because of a combination of many factors. That was true. The reason why the Great Zhou dynasty was able to unify so smoothly was mainly because of the calamity of the witch Gu. It caused the 3 dynasties to collapse and fall apart without fighting. Yulan continued, "I believe that I'm not inferior to the Empress of Great Zhou. Her only backing is just that Dao being desolate marshal." When he heard that, a strange look flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Although Dao being desolate marshal was famous in the current cultivation world, not many people had seen his appearance. Yulan did not know that the person sitting in front of her was Dao being desolate marshal. Yulan did not notice the strange look in Su Zimo's eyes and continued, "To be honest, the reason why I'm heading to the North Region Dao meet is to look for a paragon that can suppress Dao being desolate marshal." "You want to suppress desolate marshal?" "Heh." Su Zimo laughed and shook his head slightly. Yulan thought that Su Zimo did not believe her and said hurriedly, "Brother Su, Dao being desolate marshal's body was crippled by a half-martial ancestor, and he lost his divine phoenix bone and the creation green lotus. His combat strength is no longer as strong as before. Furthermore, there are many exceptional paragons and monster incarnates in this generation. There are people who can go against desolate marshal." "Oh, name them," Su Zimo asked. Yulan said, "I heard that the Yuwen clan of the 4 major cultivation clans has given birth to a monster incarnate. His Dao title is Wushuang, and he is the number 1 Dao being of the North region. The reason why I'm heading to the North region Dao meet is because I hope to get this person a help. If Dao being Wushuang can make a move to suppress desolate marshal and fight against Ethereal Peak with the Yuwen clan's power, Great Yu will definitely be able to revive our dynasty." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat, and he realized that Dao being Wushuang should be Yuwen Wushuang. At the mention of Dao being Wushuang, a look of hatred flashed through the eyes of the Golden Lion. However, he was sprawled on the side and no one noticed him. Su Zimo asked again, "Do you have a deep relationship with Dao being Wushuang?" "Not really." Yulan shook her head and sighed gently. "Although we're both at the Void Reversion Realm, I don't have the chance to come into contact with Dao being Wushuang given his status. I'm just a stranger." "If that's the case, why would he help you?" Su Zimo asked. When she heard that question, Yulan suddenly fell silent. The atmosphere became awkward. Forget it. Su Zimo waved it off casually. To be fair, Su Zimo was not curious what methods Yulan would use to employ Yuwen Wushuang's help. He was merely asking casually earlier on. Yulan took a deep breath and suddenly raised her head. "I heard that Dao being Wushuang likes beauties." Pausing for a moment, her face turned slightly red. Gritting her teeth, she said, "I think that I'm not bad looking. Furthermore, I'm at the Void Reversion Realm and was once the princess of Great Yu. I believe that he'll definitely be interested." Su Zimo was momentarily stunned. He had not expected Yulan to have such plans. "Is it worth it?" Su Zimo asked instead. As long as I can help Great Yu revive, there's nothing wrong with sacrificing my body. Yulan's tone was firm. But right after, her eyes dimmed and she smiled bitterly. I'm sure you must be despising me, right? That's right. I deserve to be looked down upon for belittling myself like this. This was something extremely private and shameful. For some reason, Yulan told it to Su Zimo. You don't have to say that. Su Zimo shook his head. Yulan sniffed and forced a smile. I've been holding it in for a long time. It's much more comfortable to talk about it. For some reason, I just feel that you're trustworthy. Pausing for a moment, she blinked at Su Zimo. A woman's sixth sense is very accurate. Standing behind Su Zimo, Nian Qi could not help but roll her eyes cutely and thought to herself that this woman was an idiot. She wished she could say it out loud. What bullshit sixth sense? This handsome, refined man before you is the Tao-being desolate marshal that you want to suppress. Night Spirit's gaze turned strange as well. When Su Zimo saw how honest the other party was, he could not pretend any longer and sighed. Actually, my name is Su Zimo. Chapter 1142, Qian Heaven City. Chapter 1142, Qian Heaven City. Ah! Yulan exclaimed softly with a delighted expression. Brother Su, you finally let down your guard and told me your real name? Su Zimo was stunned. Yulan's reaction was completely out of his expectations. Instinctively, he looked at the three Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords. The three Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords did not react either when they heard Su Zimo's name. Desolate Martial wishes to establish a Tao and impart martial arts to all living beings. Everyone knew of the title Desolate Martial. Apart from some old friends, not many people in the cultivation world knew that Desolate Marshal's name was Su Zimo. It was like how everyone knew of the title of Azura, but did not know that his name was Yen Beichen. There were many void reversions that died in the hands of Su Zimo, and he did not know the names of some of the titular disciples either. To these paragons and monster incarnates, the Tao title was their symbol. Usually, when befriending other fellow Taoists, they would only say their Tao titles. A name like Su Zimo was more like a mark of the mortal world. Su Zimo was slightly stunned, but he reacted quickly and felt relieved. That was normal. Although he was bent on killing Tao-being Xinyu, he did not know Tao-being Xinyu's name at all. It was enough that he knew that his Tao name was Xinyu, and that he was from Glass Palace. It did not matter what his name was. Initially, Su Zimo's intention was to remind Yulan. In fact, he was already prepared for a huge battle. However, he did not expect that Yulan did not know his name. Instead, she misunderstood his intentions of revealing his name as him letting down his guard. Brother Su, I want to revive my dynasty. Are you willing to help me? Yulan took a deep breath and looked at Su Zimo without blinking, asking softly with anticipation. Su Zimo shook his head. Yulan's eyes dimmed. I know that this request is a little abrupt, but before Yulan could finish, Su Zimo interrupted her with a wave of his hand. With a calm expression, he replied bluntly, Don't think about reviving your dynasty anymore. It's impossible. Yulan frowned slightly and felt a little angry. It was her dream to revive her dynasty. She did not want to admit defeat. She did not think that she would lose either. As long as she could obtain Tao-being Wushuang's help and suppress Tao-being Desolate Martial, she would definitely be able to rebuild the Great Yuwen fight against the Great Zhou for a split of the North region's territory. Earlier on, she thought that this person was pleasing to the eye. However, she suddenly realized that this green-robed cultivator was a little annoying. Brother Su, even if you don't intend to help, there's no need to attack me as such, right? Yulan tried her best to control her emotions and said in a deep voice, If I can obtain the support of some aristocratic families or gentry clans during this trip to the North region Tao meet, not only will I be able to revive my dynasty, I might even be able to overturn the Great Zhou dynasty. Impossible. Su Zimo shook his head and smiled, saying word by word, As long as Desolate Martial is alive, you will never be able to revive your dynasty and topple the Great Zhou dynasty. Fate is decided by our own hands. Yulan's tone turned unyielding as well. I intend to ask Dao Being Wushuang to help this time round. If he's willing to help, Desolate Marshal won't be able to do anything. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo reared his head and laughed. What are you laughing at? Yulan asked coldly. Su Zimo pursed his lips. Is Dao Being Wushuang that powerful? In this generation, there are many paragons and monster incarnates. It's a golden era for the entire Tianhuang mainland. Desolate Marshal isn't invincible either. There will definitely be someone who can surpass him and trample him beneath their feet. Yulan was enraged and her expression turned cold. She could understand why Su Zimo would not want to help her. However, this person was way too despicable. He was actually sparing no effort to attack her. She truly could not accept that. At that moment, Yulan did not realize that Su Zimo was not trying to attack her. Instead, he was reminding her to back off to avoid defeat. Both of them did not have the same viewpoint. They would only end up arguing if the conversation continued. Although the two Dharma characteristic Dao Lords behind Yulan did not say anything, their gazes towards Su Zimo were cold. Earlier on, they did not express anything when Su Zimo threatened their princes. After all, their princes were the ones who were unreasonable first. Now that the green-robed cultivator was so brazen as to argue with Princess Yulan, the two Dharma characteristic Dao Lords wanted to kill him. As long as Yulan gave the order or a look, both of them would attack decisively. Yulan stood up and intended to leave. The two Dharma characteristic Dao Lords even asked with their eyes if she wanted to make a move on the green-robed cultivator. She shook her head gently. Although she was a little angry, it was not to the point where she wanted to kill indiscriminately. Furthermore, she and Su Zimo merely had different thoughts and opinions. The two of them were still chatting casually earlier on, and there was no need for them to kill each other. Yulan turned back to look at Su Zimo. The green-robed cultivator was still sipping his tea indifferently, as though he did not realize that his words had nearly gotten him killed. This person has no shrewdness at all. Could I have misjudged him? Yulan sighed internally and turned to leave. Su Zimo, who was seated at the table, was expressionless, but he sighed internally. If Yulan had not stopped the two Dharma characteristic Dao Lords from attacking, the two imperial advisors would have been reduced to two corpses by now. Yulan thought that she had saved Su Zimo's life by stopping the two Dharma characteristic Dao Lords because of her benevolence. However, she did not know that her benevolence had saved herself. For the next few days, Yulan spent most of her time in the cabin. She would only come out occasionally to chat with Su Zimo. However, after their previous argument, there was clearly more animosity between the two of them. Although Yulan did not chase Su Zimo and the others away, she did not have the same enthusiasm as when they first met. On the other hand, the two princes were much friendlier towards Su Zimo. Each time, they would smile and accompany him, as though they had already forgotten about their previous unhappiness. About 10 days later, the outline of a city gradually appeared on the horizon. As they got closer, the city became clearer. The city walls extended for 500 kilometers with no end in sight. Traces of time were etched on the gigantic black bricks. How long was 500 kilometers? Cultivators who had just entered the void reversion realm could only extend their spirit consciousness to a radius of 50 kilometers. Only the spirit consciousness of Dharma characteristic Dao Lords could extend to 500 kilometers. Just by looking at the outline of the ancient city, one could tell that it was grand and majestic, even more spectacular than the capital of the great Zhou dynasty. It was like an ancient behemoth sprawled on the ground. Qian Heaven City. It had a long history and could be traced back to the ancient era. All these years, the North Region Dao Meet would be held in this ancient city. Su Zimo's group arrived before the city. Although their spirit vessel was huge, it was as tiny as a grain of sand before the ancient city. We're finally here. Yulan stood in front of the spirit vessel and murmured softly as she looked at the massive ancient city before her. She had a complicated expression and her eyes flashed with anticipation, struggle, helplessness, and shame. If you regret it, it's not too late to return now. Su Zimo could sense the change in Yulan's emotions and said indifferently. Yulan was silent. Eventually, her gaze turned resolute. As long as she could revive her dynasty, she would not regret it no matter how huge a price she had to pay. Since I've come this far, there's no way out for me. Yulan clenched her fists and said resolutely. Chapter 1143, Vengeful. Chapter 1143, Vengeful. When Su Zimo and the others arrived at Qian Heaven City, they could see many cultivators descending from outside the city towards the city gate. There were many armored soldiers guarding both sides of the city gate. These soldiers were not ordinary either. A single spirit consciousness sweep revealed that most of them were void reversions. On the city walls, there were 4 gigantic mirrors that shone with 4 beams of light that enveloped the city gates. Demon Revealing Mirror. The North Region Dao Meet was a grand event for human cultivators of the North Region, and no accidents were allowed. With the existence of the Demon Revealing Mirrors, fiend demons who took on human form and tried to mix in with cultivators would be captured. On the city wall, the cultivator guarding the Demon Revealing Mirrors wore a Taoist robe and exuded a powerful aura. His gaze was sharp as he scanned the cultivators entering the city below. This cultivator was a commander of Qian Heaven City and was also a Dharma-characteristic Tao Lord. The 4 gates of Qian Heaven City were guarded by Dharma-characteristic commanders and void reversion soldiers who were extremely strict when checking on cultivators. Let's enter the city too. After saying that, Yulan retracted her spirit vessel and descended to the ground, heading towards the city gate. Their group had 3 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords and instantly attracted the attention of the Dharma-characteristic commander on the city wall. Who are you? At the city gate, the 2 void reversion soldiers crossed their spears with a clang as sparks flew, blocking Su Zimo's group. I'm Yulan from the Great Yu Dynasty. Yulan had a calm expression as she pointed to the 2 princes beside her. These 2 are the princes of Great Xia and Great Shang. Great Yu, Great Xia and Great Shang? The soldier guarding the city sneered. The 3 dynasties have already been destroyed. How dare they call themselves princes? Upon hearing that, the 2 princes flushed red with embarrassment. However, both of them had timid expressions and did not dare to say anything. Although these 2 people were merely guards, they came from a major aristocratic cultivation family. Even if this was before their dynasties were destroyed, the 2 princes might not dare to offend these 2 guards. The other guard sized Yulan up brazenly with a burning gaze. Fellow Taoist Yulan, I'm sure you don't have anywhere to go after your dynasty is destroyed. Why don't you come to my place? We can become Tao companions and research on the Tao of dual cultivation. As the princess of the Great Yu Dynasty, Yulan was extremely beautiful to begin with. Coupled with the noble aura of royalty, she was extremely attractive to most cultivators. Oh. Yulan's expression did not change as she said indifferently, if you want to dual cultivate with me, you'll have to ask Dao being Wushuang for permission. When the guard heard Dao being Wushuang's name, his expression changed and his eyes revealed deep fear. In reality, Yulan had never met Yuwen Wushuang before and had no relationship with him. Her words were ambiguous as well. However, bystanders would subconsciously think that she was close to Dao being Wushuang. Fellow Taoist Yulan, I'm sorry. I was rude. The guard bowed slightly and apologized hurriedly. Yulan nodded and headed into the city with the 2 princes and 3 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords. Su Zimo's group of 4 followed behind them. Su Zimo's gaze inadvertently swept past the demon revealing mirrors on the city wall, and he asked Night Spirit via voice transmission, Can you get through them? Don't worry. Night Spirit's expression was indifferent. The golden lion was in his true form, implying that he was a mount or spirit pet of a cultivator. As such, he could enter the city. As for Su Zimo's green lotus true body, there was no demon bloodline within it. Nian Qi was a god race being and not a demon. Night Spirit was the only one at risk of being exposed. The 4 of them walked to the area enveloped by the demon revealing mirrors and headed into the city without stopping. When the power of the demon revealing mirrors landed on Night Spirit, It was as though it had entered a black hole and could not detect any aura at all. There was no reaction from the demon revealing mirrors. Right then, the commander guarding the city wall frowned and looked at Su Zimo and the others. Earlier on, he suddenly felt his heart palpitate. However, upon careful thought, he did not discover anything unusual. The commander shook his head and continued to scan others. Compared to the repressive tension at the city gate, the center of Qian Heaven City was extremely lively. Cultivators could be seen flying through the air everywhere. There were also cultivators sitting on spirit birds that swept past everyone's heads. Many old structures were built within the ancient city. Many cultivators were gathered on both sides of the long street as well. Some of the cultivators sat on the ground with items that shone with spirit light placed before them. The North Region Dao meet would only be held a few days later. For now, Qian Heaven City was considered as a rare marketplace. Some of the cultivators remained silent and waited for others to step forward, using their spirit consciousness to discuss the price secretly. On the other hand, there were some cultivators who shouted loudly, wanting to attract more cultivators so that their treasures could be sold for a higher price. The two princes walked side by side with their spirit consciousnesses fluctuating. It was unknown what they were secretly chatting about. Yuwen frowned slightly and pondered for a moment before stopping. Everyone must be tired from the long journey. Let's find a place to rest first. Pausing for a moment, she turned to look at Su Zimo. Since we've already arrived at Qian Heaven City, let's part ways here. Take care, Brother Su. She placed heavier emphasis on the words, take care. The way she looked at Su Zimo carried a hint of caution as well. However, Su Zimo was distracted and did not seem to notice. Don't. The two princes hurried over and smiled warmly. We've hit it off with you, Brother Su. Since we've already arrived at Qian Heaven City, why should we be in a hurry to part ways? Let's rest for the night and explore this marketplace tomorrow. Sure. Perhaps moved by the enthusiasm of the two princes, Su Zimo agreed with a smile. Yuwen frowned and sighed internally. This Su Zimo was truly naive, to think that he had not realized that he was in an extremely dangerous situation up till now. For the past few days, the two princes had been flattering Su Zimo with a warm expression. However, Yuwen knew very well that these two princes were born in the royal family and were pampered. They were vengeful people. How could they let things go after being threatened by Su Zimo? It was unusual for the two of them to have such a drastic change in attitude towards Su Zimo. Any slightly intelligent cultivator would be able to tell that something was amiss. However, Su Zimo was not the only one in his group to not notice anything. The other three were like fools as well. The black-robed man had a cold expression and was indifferent to everything. The crippled golden lion could not understand the schemes of humans. Although the maidservant was extremely beautiful, she was merely a flower vase. As the princess of the Great Yu Dynasty, there were some things that she could not explain too clearly. However, she could not bear it and wanted to remind Su Zimo. Princess, forget it. Right then, Uncle Zheng's voice sounded in her mind. You've already done your best. If this lad comes along tonight, it will be just his fate. Sigh. Looking at Su Zimo, who was traveling with the two princes and was oblivious to the danger, Yuwen sighed helplessly. Chapter 1144, Killing in 10 at Night. Chapter 1144, Killing in 10 at Night. Yuwen, Su Zimo, and the others found an inn nearby to stay temporarily. There were inns like this everywhere in Qian Heaven City. Their group asked for a total of 3 rooms. One was for Yuwen and Uncle Zheng. One was for the two princes of Great Shang and Great Xia, as well as their imperial advisors. The last one was for Su Zimo's group of 4. Brother Su, rest early. Let's tour the city tomorrow and see if we can find any treasures. The Prince of Great Shang greeted Su Zimo warmly and bid farewell to him. Sure. Su Zimo replied casually. The two princes turned to leave and exchanged glances with one another with a smug look in their eyes. Back in the room, the two imperial advisors set up a dermic power barrier that isolated the sound of spirit consciousnesses right away. "Are you sure you want to do this, princes?" one of the imperial advisors asked in a deep voice. "Of course." The Prince of Great Xia had a dark expression as he said coldly, "You were present when this person tried to kill me. As the saying goes, the first to strike is the strongest, and the last to strike will suffer." "That's right." The Prince of Great Shang nodded as well. "Since this person is an itinerant cultivator without any shrewdness or background, it's fine to kill him." Pausing for a moment, he seemed to have recalled something as he licked his lips. "Right? Don't hurt that yellow-haired girl." The two imperial advisors exchanged glances without saying anything. Both of them were well aware of some things. The true reason why the two princes wanted to kill Su Zimo was because they wanted to get their hands on the golden-haired girl. After all, when the Great Shang and Great Xia dynasties were still around, the two princes had done too many things like this. The two imperial advisors felt disdain towards this matter. However, neither of them rejected the princes. After all, they did not like Su Zimo either. Given their cultivation and combat strength, it was extremely easy for them to kill 3 or 2 void reversions in this inn. On the other side, Yuwen looked at Su Zimo's departing back view and felt a hint of reluctance. No matter what, she was the one who invited him. If not for that, this person might not have formed a feud with the two princes. If he died here because of that, she would feel bad. At that thought, Yuwen slowed down. After the two princes left, she whispered to Uncle Zheng, "Uncle Zheng, go back first. I'll be right back." With that said, Yuwen followed Su Zimo into his room. "Is there anything?" Su Zimo raised his brow and asked. Yuwen closed the door hurriedly and waved her sleeves, creating a dermic power barrier. She whispered, "Brother Su, if I were you, I would leave this inn right away." "Oh?" Su Zimo asked curiously, "Why?" Yuwen frowned slightly and asked in a grim tone, "Brother Su, do you really think that you'll have a chance to see the sun tomorrow after resting here for the night?" Su Zimo's expression changed and his voice turned deep as he asked mysteriously, "Why? Is there going to be rain tomorrow?" She could not help but burst into laughter. Yulan's face darkened and she almost exploded. Rain? More like his brains were flooded with rainwater. Yuwen could not help but curse. This person was truly extremely stupid. She had already warned him to this extent, but he still did not notice. Yuwen was enraged. She had truly misjudged this time round and thought that this person was not simple. The golden lion sprawled on the side and could not help but grin as well. It had been a long time since he had such a smile on his face. Suddenly, he felt as though he had returned to the ancient battlefield where the 7 of them were invincible and joked around all day long. That was extremely enjoyable. At that moment, the golden lion felt much more relieved. Yuwen took a few deep breaths in succession as her towering chest rose and fell. She tried her best to compose herself and grit her teeth. "Brother Su, you're already in big trouble." After pausing for a moment, she no longer bothered to hide and said straightforwardly, "Someone wants to kill you. Hurry and run." Initially, she thought that Su Zimo would be shocked. Unexpectedly, he shrugged his shoulders with a calm expression. Waving his hand, he said casually, "It's all right. My life is tough. Generally speaking, those who try to kill me end up dying miserable deaths." He was not lying. Over the past 100 years, countless experts wanted to kill him, but most of them were already dead. However, his words sounded extremely ridiculous to Yuwen. How arrogant and conceited was he to be able to say something like that without knowing who his opponents were? If he knew that the people who wanted to kill him were 2 Dharma-characteristic Dowlords, he would probably be scared out of his wits. Good luck? Yuwen was disappointed and did not continue persuading him. She merely left a sentence coldly before turning to leave. "See you tomorrow," Su Zimo said with a smile. Yuwen stopped in her tracks and shuddered in anger. Gritting her teeth, she said, "I hope so." After Yuwen left and Su Zimo closed the door, he retracted his smile and murmured softly, "Seems like this is going to be a restless night." Yulan returned to her room and was still upset. Forget it. Uncle Zheng smiled calmly and said, Princess, why are you angry over someone who is about to die? You are benevolent and already gave him a reminder. You will not be to blame for this matter. I'm just. For some reason, Yulan felt indignant. Her first impression of Su Zimo was that he was not simple. That was the reason why she invited him warmly and even revealed her background and plans. She wanted to befriend him. She believed in her first instinct. However, after interacting with him for the past few days, she realized that there was something mysterious about him. It was hazy and unclear. At times, he was silent and his deep eyes seemed to contain the sea of stars. From time to time, he would exude an aura inadvertently. It was mighty, domineering, and looked down on everything. This ethereal aura seemed like it could devour mountains and rivers and contain the vast firmaments. However, at times, this person did not seem to be shrewd and did not know when to advance or retreat. In fact, he did not even notice the scheming plots hatched by other cultivators. Let's not think about him anymore. Yulan shook her head. After a long time, she had no idea what to do, and her head felt heavy instead. She tried her best to compose herself and laid on the bed to clear her mind so that she could retain clarity and conserve her energy. As time passed, the night deepened. The entire Qian Heaven City was no longer as bustling as it was in the day and was much quieter. In the dark night, in an inconspicuous inn, there was a chilling killing intent. Two figures floated out of a room silently. They were the imperial advisors of Great Xia and Great Shang. The two of them exchanged glances and nodded. In a flash, they floated towards Su Zimo's room like two ghosts. Chapter 1145, Nightmare. Chapter 1145, Nightmare. Standing at the door, the two Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords listened intently. At this distance, the two of them could clearly hear the sounds of breathing in the room. There were 4 of them in total. Every single breath was even and steady. It was clear that the 4 void reversions in the room did not notice their actions at all. Both of them smirked smugly. Given their cultivation realms, it was way too easy for them to hide from the senses of void reversions. Their spirit consciousnesses moved and enveloped the room slowly, forming a gigantic spirit consciousness barrier that could isolate sound. Given their methods, it was extremely easy for them to kill void reversions. However, this was Qian Heaven City after all. It would be best if they did not alarm anyone. That way, they could do it cleanly without attracting any unforeseen circumstances. After the spirit consciousness barrier was formed, the two of them no longer hid their tracks and pushed the door open, closing it behind them. The room was small and could be seen with a single glance. There was a bed in the innermost area, and the green-robed cultivator was lying inside with his back facing the two imperial advisors. He was still asleep. Beside the bed, the golden-haired girl sat on the ground with her eyes closed, as though she was cultivating. In a corner on the other side, a golden lion was sprawled on the ground. It seemed to have heard the commotion, but it merely moved its ears and did not turn around. The two imperial advisors were stunned for a moment before sneering. They did not conceal the sound of their doors opening and closing. Despite such circumstances, the people in this room were not alert at all. They totally deserved to die. They truly did not know how the 4 of them managed to survive and cultivate to the void reversion realm given their poor awareness. But soon, the two imperial advisors frowned. There seemed to be something amiss in the room. It was as though they had neglected something extremely important. All of a sudden, almost at the same time, a spark flashed through their minds. There was one less person in the room. Before they entered the room, there were 4 breathing sounds. However, one of them went missing after they entered the room. That was because their gazes were drawn to Su Zimo, Nianqi, and the Golden Lion at the first moment. As such, they failed to realize it right away. The person who disappeared was most likely still in this room. In fact, he managed to hide from their senses. Although the two imperial advisors were at the Dharma characteristic realm, They felt their scalps tingle in that instant, as though they were targeted by an extremely terrifying existence. A blurry figure was hidden in the darkness above them. The figure was extremely close to the two of them and was almost within reach. However, the two Imperial advisors had not noticed it before this. Not good. The hearts of the two Imperial advisors nearly exploded as they wanted to release their dermic powers and leave this place right away. Unfortunately, it was too late. The moment they stepped into the room, they were already dead. In the darkness, Night Spirit was like a hunting god of death. His gaze was cold and emotionless as a purple gold tail extended from behind him. A cold glint shone on his tailbone like a sharp spike that pierced through the back of the head of an Imperial advisor instantly and extended out from his glabella. Night Spirit's tail pierced the head of an Imperial advisor. That person's essence spirit died on the spot without a single sound. The moment Night Spirit extended his tail, he extended his palm and stabbed down on the head of another Imperial advisor. There was almost no resistance. Against Night Spirit's claws, the tough skull of a Dharma-characteristic Tao Lord was like tofu. 5 bloodied holes appeared on the head of the Imperial advisor. Before he could react, his essence spirit was crushed and he died. If it was a head-on fight, 2 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords might not be as useless. However, Night Spirit planned ahead, hid in the dark and attacked first with the advantage. Before the 2 Imperial advisors could even see how Night Spirit attacked, they were already dead on the spot. Night Spirit's expression was calm, as though he had done something insignificant. He stood at the door and listened for a while. After sensing for a moment, he carried the 2 corpses and left the room in a flash. In the darkness, his figure was almost imperceptible like a ghost. In the blink of an eye, he had already infiltrated the rooms of the 2 princes. The room was slightly bigger, and there were 2 large beds. The 2 princes were sleeping soundly on the bed. Even in their sleep, they had lewd expressions and drool at the corners of their mouths. They had a plan long ago. If nothing went wrong, the annoying green-robed cultivator, the cold black-robed man, and the crippled golden lion would be killed by the 2 Imperial advisors. The golden-haired girl would be the only one left. Once she caught sight of the tragic deaths of those around her the next morning, there was a high chance she would suffer a mental breakdown from the immense blow. At that time, the 2 of them would appear opportunely to comfort and enjoy life with her. With that in mind, the 2 of them were already dreaming. Unbeknownst to them, there was a black-robed man hugging 2 corpses by their bedside, glaring at them coldly. 2 dermic arts shot out from Night Spirit's fingertip and landed on the 2 princes, allowing them to sleep even deeper. Thereafter, Night Spirit placed the Grand Xia's Imperial advisor's corpse gently on the prince's bed. The corpse laid beside the Prince of Great Xia with its body tilted to the side, staring at the lecherous face of the prince with widened eyes. This scene was extremely strange. The Prince of Great Xia was in a deep sleep and was even smacking his lips from time to time. However, opposite him lay a corpse that was still slightly warm. Blood was still flowing from its head, staining the bed red. It was hard to imagine what would happen when the Prince of Great Xia woke up and witnessed this scene. Turning around, Night Spirit came to another bed and placed the Grand Shang's Imperial advisor on it with the same method. The Imperial advisor glared at the Prince of Great Shang with dead fish eyes. The 2 princes did not realize that their nightmare had just begun. After doing that, Night Spirit smirked and left the room in a flash. The entire process was silent and did not attract anyone's attention. On the other side, in Yulan's room, she tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. A moment later, Uncle Zheng's voice sounded. "Princess, sleep? That person should be dead." When she heard that, Yulan shuddered and sighed weakly. Actually, Uncle Zhang was also paying attention to the commotion outside. The 2 Imperial advisors of Great Shang and Great Xia left the room and arrived outside Su Zimo's room to set up a spirit consciousness barrier. These actions could not escape Uncle Zheng's senses. Not long after the 2 Imperial advisors entered the room, the spirit consciousness barrier disappeared. Furthermore, The two of them never came out again. This meant that the two of them had already killed everyone in the room cleanly before dispersing their spirit consciousness barriers. Uncle Zheng no longer paid attention to that room. At that moment, he did not realize that right under his nose, Night's spirit had left the room silently to return two corpses. Chapter 1146, Corpse. Chapter 1146, Corpse. The next day, Yulan sat up the moment dawn broke. Her eyes were slightly red and bloodshot. Last night, when she heard the news of Su Zimo and the others dying, not only did she not manage to fall asleep, her heart was even more flustered and she was no longer sleepy. Yulan sat by the bed and stared at something in deep thought. Uncle Zheng, who was sitting quietly at the side, opened his eyes slowly and consoled her softly. "Princess, you can't be blamed for this. You don't have to feel guilty at all. There are some things that you'll be able to accept more easily once you're older." "Yes?" Yulan took a deep breath and nodded. "Uncle Zheng, I know. Right now, the most important thing for me is to revive my dynasty." Her gaze turned resolute once more. "Nothing can stop me from rebuilding Great Yu." "I'm relieved that you have that belief." Uncle Zheng nodded with a smile. "Princess, there's good news that I haven't told you yet. If nothing goes wrong, the two imperial advisors of Great Shang and Great Xia will assist you as well." "For real?" Yulan's eyes lit up. If she could obtain the help of the two Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords, the chance of her rebuilding the Great Yu dynasty would increase. Uncle Zheng nodded. "Those two princes have no ambitions and can't be of much use. They revealed unintentionally to me that they wanted to follow you. As long as you agree to it, I'll help you persuade them to our side today." "All right." Yulan bowed deeply to Uncle Zheng and said sincerely, "Thank you for your trouble, Uncle Zheng. You will always be the imperial advisor of Great Yu and my teacher. Let's go. You haven't slept the entire night. Go out and take a breather." Uncle Zheng stood up and said. Yulan nodded and pushed open the door. A gust of fresh spirit chi surged over, and her spirit was shaken. Instinctively, Yulan's gaze shifted to a room not far away. A cultivator with delicate features should have been alive in that room. But now, he was probably a cold corpse. Right then, the door creaked open. A familiar figure strode out from within. Dressed in green robes, he stood at the door with sleepy eyes and stretched lazily with both hands raised. Yulan's mouth gradually widened in shock as she looked at the figure unblinkingly, rooted to the spot. Seemingly sensing Yulan's gaze, Su Zimo turned to look at her and greeted with a smile. "Morning." "Ah." Yulan replied softly with a flustered expression. "Morning." How did you?" Yulan blinked but did not know how to ask. Although she had countless questions when she saw that Su Zimo was still alive, she heaved a long sigh of relief in the depths of her heart with an inexplicable joy. Uncle Zheng was initially in the house. When he heard the commotion outside, he frowned and walked out to take a look. He was stunned on the spot as well. "You're still alive." He did not hide his surprise and asked directly. Su Zimo had a calm expression. "I'm indeed tired from the long journey and slept soundly. How could I have died?" Uncle Zheng was stunned when he saw that Su Zimo did not seem to be faking it. Right then, Night's spirit walked out from behind Su Zimo. Thereafter, Nian Qi appeared. Finally, the Golden Lion walked out as well. The four of them were safe and sound without any signs of injury. How was that possible? Uncle Zheng was confused. Last night, he clearly sensed the two imperial advisors of Great Xia and Great Shang entering Su Zimo's room. Furthermore, the two of them had specially set up a spirit consciousness barrier. Could something have happened that caused the two imperial advisors to not make a move? Uncle Zheng was prepared to make a move and asked the two imperial advisors what exactly happened in that room last night. Right then, a tragic scream sounded from the room of the princes of Great Shang and Great Xia. Immediately after, another even more tragic scream sounded, filled with endless fear and shock. Uncle Zheng's expression changed. Before he could think about why Su Zimo was still alive, His figure flashed, and he dashed towards the room of the two princes. The old man's movement technique was extremely fast, and one could not tell that he was in his twilight years. Yuwen followed hurriedly as well. Su Zimo smiled gently and strode slowly towards the room. Bang! Uncle Zheng knocked open the door and rushed in. When he focused his gaze, he could not help but take a deep breath and retreat half a step instinctively. Uncle Zheng, what's wrong? Yuwen came forward and asked hurriedly when she saw Uncle Zheng's odd expression. She then looked into the room. That single look shocked her as well, and blood drained from her face. The room reeked of blood, and there was a strong aura of death that was nauseating. Two corpses laid on the two beds facing the door. There was a pool of blood beneath them that had stained the bedsheets red and was almost dried up. It was clear that they had been dead for a long time. Although the two corpses had their backs facing the door, Uncle Zheng and Yuwen could recognize their backs. The two corpses were the imperial advisors of Great Shang and Great Xia. The two Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords were dead. Who did it? How was it so silent that there wasn't any bit of commotion? The two of them had infiltrated Su Zimo's room last night. How did they end up dead here? Countless questions surfaced. Uncle Zheng and Yuwen's minds were in chaos. The deaths of the two imperial advisors sent chills down Uncle Zheng's spine. This meant that he was also in immense danger and could die at any moment. Uncle Zheng was the imperial advisor of a dynasty and a Dharma-characteristic expert after all. He calmed down swiftly within a few breaths and entered the room. Enduring her disgust, Yuwen followed suit. Uncle Zheng looked around but did not find any clues. There were no signs of a fight either. Why you guys, don't come over. In the bed, the Prince of Great Xia was curled up in a corner with a frightened expression. His body was trembling as he looked at Uncle Zheng and the others, his voice quivering. On the other bed, the situation of the Prince of Great Shang was not much better. As expected, the two screams earlier on were released by the two princes. When the two of them woke up and saw the two imperial advisors they relied on lying beside them as corpses, glaring at them with eyes that resembled dead fish, who could take it? Even though the two of them were nascent souls, they were both mentally unstable from the sudden shock. Uncle Zheng came to the bedside and frowned when he smelled the stench of urine and feces. The two princes were so scared that they were peeing and shitting their pants. They were no longer as elegant as they were in the past and were cowering in a corner, trembling like mice with nowhere to run. Uncle Zheng clenched his fist slightly and flipped the corpses of the two imperial advisors over. Both of them had horrified expressions, and their bulging eyes were filled with immense fear. Even though he was prepared, his heart skipped a beat. It was truly hard to imagine how frightened the two Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords were before their deaths to reveal such expressions. Chapter 1147, Fiendcelestial. Chapter 1147, Fiendcelestial. How could this be? Yuwen frowned and could not help but ask. I have no idea as well. Uncle Zheng shook his head and looked at the two princes who were still in shock in the corner. Perhaps only they know the answer. I don't know. I don't know anything. The voice of the Prince of Great Xia was still trembling. Uncle Zheng's gaze was sharp as he shouted, Your Highness, calm down. If you don't say anything and the two imperial advisors died for no reason, we might die tomorrow. Leave this place. The Prince of Great Shang seemed to have found a straw to clutch at as he said hurriedly, That's right. I want to leave Qian Heaven City and all of you. I don't want to revive my dynasty anymore. With that said, the Prince of Great Shang scrambled out of the door. The Prince of Great Xia reacted and followed closely behind. Just as the two princes ran to the door, Su Zimo happened to walk in. With a gentle expression, he asked with a smile, Your Highnesses, where do you want to go? The expressions of the two princes changed and they shuddered instinctively. To them, the green-robed cultivator's smile was akin to a Fiendcelestial from hell. We want to go back. The Prince of Great Xia had a fearful expression and his voice was pleading. Su Zimo said, Don't be like that. Didn't we agree yesterday that we're going to tour Qian Heaven City today? The two princes were so scared that they were on the verge of tears. How could they be in the mood to tour Qian Heaven City? Both of them knew that they were the ones who sent the two imperial advisors to assassinate Su Zimo. But now, the two imperial advisors were dead while Su Zimo was safe and sound. This was something that could not be clearer. The smiling, gentle, and scholarly cultivator before them was a Fiendcelestial. Right now, this Fiendcelestial was standing at the entrance, inviting the two of them to travel together. Both of them wanted to cry but had no tears to shed. They could neither advance nor retreat. Su Zimo's gaze shifted to the two corpses in the room, and he sighed gently. It's a pity that the two imperial advisors died just like that. Uncle Zheng and Yuwen were both staring at Su Zimo. However, they could not read anything from Su Zimo's face. The only suspicious thing was that this person was way too calm. However, it did not make sense for them to relate the deaths of the two imperial advisors to this man just because he was too calm. That was too dogmatic and unreasonable. The two imperial advisors were at the Dharma characteristic realm. However, Su Zimo's group were all at the void reversion realm. There was a difference of a major cultivation realm between them. How was it possible for him to kill two Dharma characteristic Tao lords silently? Your Highnesses. Uncle Zheng's attention shifted back to the two princes. He asked in a deep voice, did the two imperial advisors head out last night? Yes. The two of them nodded obediently. Where? Uncle Zheng asked. The two princes looked hesitant and stole a glance at Su Zimo, not daring to say anything. Uncle Zheng narrowed his eyes and asked in a deep voice, did they head to Su Zimo's room? I don't know. The Prince of Great Xia shook his head hurriedly. I fell asleep last night and didn't know anything. The moment I woke up, I saw the imperial advisor dead. Me too, the Prince of Great Xiang added hurriedly. Why would they come to my room? Su Zimo looked at the two princes and asked with a fake smile. The two imperial advisors weren't trying to kill me, were they? And no. The two princes denied immediately. Su Zimo nodded and said indifferently, that's good. Usually, those who want to kill me will die miserable deaths. A careless statement may reveal much to an attentive listener. Although Su Zimo said it casually, the two princes were so scared that their hearts skipped a beat. Their faces turned pale and their legs went limp, almost kneeling on the ground. Yulan's heart skipped a beat as well. When she reminded Su Zimo of the impending trouble last night, the latter told her something almost identical. To think that the two imperial advisors would already be dead by dawn today. Could this matter really have nothing to do with him? I'll head out first. You guys take care of it. We still have to go tour the city later. Su Zimo had just turned around when he paused and glanced sideways. Your Highnesses will travel with me and not leave secretly, right? Absolutely not. The two princes said hurriedly. That's good. Su Zimo smiled in satisfaction and turned to leave. By the time Su Zimo's figure disappeared completely, the two princes could no longer hold on and collapsed onto the ground, drenched in sweat. It's him. It must be him. The Prince of Great Xia trembled slightly and murmured repeatedly. Who is it? Yuwen could not help but ask. You mean to say that the deaths of the two imperial advisors were caused by Brother Su? The Prince of Great Xiang nodded repeatedly as well. Yes, that's the devil. Yuwen looked at Uncle Zheng instinctively. The words of the two princes were indeed ridiculous. However, she still wanted to hear Uncle Zheng's speculation. My first reaction was also Su Zimo. Uncle Zheng said in a low voice, however, it's definitely not them who did this. Why do you say that? Yuwen asked. Uncle Zheng pointed to the fatal wounds on the heads of the two imperial advisors and said, 2 wounds that were fatal. This means that the two of them had almost no resistance. In other words, the combat strength of this murderer is superior to the 2 imperial advisors. Yuwen nodded. That's right. Even if Su Zimo and the others have the strength to kill Dharma characteristic Tao lords across a major cultivation realm, they won't be able to kill with a single fatal blow. That's only one of the reasons, Uncle Zheng said, looking at the 2 wounds. It's clear that it wasn't caused by humans or weapons. As he said that, Uncle Zheng placed his palm on the head of an advisor and said in a deep voice, "This should be the claw of some fiend demon. There's still a trace of demonic qi on it." As for Su Zimo's group of 4, only the lion is a demon. However, his strength is not at that level. Furthermore, the lion's claws are completely different from these wounds. Yulan nodded. That was almost solid proof. However, what she did not expect was that there was a terrifying existence among Su Zimo's group that could even hide from the demon-revealing mirrors. It was impossible for Uncle Zheng to see through Night Spirit's disguise. Yulan looked at the 2 princes. "Did you guys hear that? Brother Su can't be the one behind this." "It's him." The Prince of Great Xia seemed to have fallen into a trance, and the fear in his eyes did not dissipate as he continued. "It must be him. His smile and gaze are telling me that he's the one who killed the Imperial advisors." Sigh. Yulan sighed. After the shock, both of them were no longer in their right minds. The 2 princes were reduced to such a state and would have to live in fear every day. This was much more torturous than killing them outright. Indeed, the 2 princes were scared out of their wits. However, their guesses were very close to the truth. They were not as calm and rational as Uncle Zheng, and Yulan to be able to deduce many conclusions based on some clues. They were simple-minded. The 2 Imperial advisors went to kill Su Zimo, but the latter was alive while the 2 Imperial advisors were dead. This was definitely Su Zimo's doing. Chapter 1148. Dao Meat begins. Chapter 1148. Dao Meat begins. No matter who the true culprit was, Uncle Zheng and Yulan felt a sense of pressure when 2 Dharma-characteristic Dao Lords died beside them. The North Region Dao Meet had yet to begin. For the next few days, Uncle Zheng and Yulan did not dare to rest or relax. They were afraid that the fiend demon hidden in the dark would assassinate them silently. If that was the case for the 2 of them, it was even worse for the 2 princes. For the next few days, the 2 princes were tortured by the fear in their hearts to the point of almost breaking down. They rapidly lost weight and looked dispirited. At times, the 2 princes would be in a daze and mutter things like, "It must be him," repeatedly. Su Zimo's group of 4 were the only ones that looked the same as usual. At times, even Yulan admired the 4 of them. On the day the 2 Imperial advisors died, she told Su Zimo about Uncle Zheng's speculation. Furthermore, she told Su Zimo and the others that there was a powerful fiend demon hiding in Qian Heaven City and told them to be careful. In the end, Su Zimo and the others did not care at all, as though they did not know what fear was. She did not know if this person was truly fearless, or if he was just naive and had not experienced the terror of life and death. For the past few days, Yulan had not been idle either. She had obtained a lot of information regarding the North Region Dao Meet in Qian Heaven City. In this era, the cultivation civilization was flourishing and was almost comparable to the ancient era. There were many paragons and monster incarnates. Many paragons were gathered at this North Region Dao Meet alone. Many of them were even as famous as Dao being Wushuang. Dao being 100 Ghost of the Yin Ghost sect, one of the upper sects, had cultivated a secret skill that no one in the Yin Ghost sect had managed to cultivate for the past 1,000 years. His combat strength was heaven-defying, and he had suppressed countless people of the same cultivation realm. Up till now, he had fought countless battles and was defeated less than 10 times. Dao being Blazing Son of Blaze Columbus Valley, another upper sect, was also notorious. He was lauded as the #1 fire tamer of the North Region, and his understanding of the fire Dao was unprecedented, comparable even to ancient sages. Dao being Zimu of Heavenly Piercing Sword sect was a genius of the sword Dao. He was extremely famous in the North Region. It was said that a mighty figure of Middle Continent's sword sect appreciated his potential and wanted to take him in as a disciple but was rejected by him. Dao being Zimu was known as one of the North Region's twin swords. Of the upper sects, 7 Kills sect and Mystic Firmament Divine Cult sent out their paragons as well. Of course, some of the 10 upper sects of the North Region were weaker as well. For example, Dragon Tiger sect was implicated in the fight between the four dynasties earlier on and suffered considerable losses. Apart from the 10 upper sects, the four gentry clans were not to be underestimated as well. For example, Dao being Illusion Light of the Dugu family was a paragon of the sword Dao. His illusion sword Dao could make it difficult to distinguish from reality. At the same cultivation realm, there were few people who could see through his sword Dao. Dao being Illusion Light was also the other one of the North region's twin swords. Dao being Zimu and Dao being Illusion Light were two geniuses of the sword and were extremely notorious in the North region. They were practically invincible. In this North region Dao meet, there was probably going to be a showdown between their swords. Of course, among the paragons, Dao being Wushuang of the Yuwen clan was the most famous. There were also some paragons who wanted to challenge Dao being Wushuang's status. Apart from the sparring between void reversions, there were also many fights between Dharma-characteristic Dao lords. There would definitely be a fierce battle at the North region Dao meet. However, no one realized that there were 4 unassuming people in Qian Heaven City who were prepared to create a massive wave at the North region Dao meet. For the past few days, apart from the first day when Su Zimo went out for a walk, he had been staying in the inn to recuperate. Yulan wanted to make use of this opportunity to befriend paragons as much as possible and establish connections with some sects and factions to prepare for her dynasty revival plans. However, Su Zimo did not have many plans. Upon arrival at Qian Heaven City, there were only 2 things he needed to confirm. First, he wanted to know where Yuwen Wushuang was. Second, he wanted to know if Dao being Qian Yu would be coming. These 2 pieces of news could be obtained within a day. For the past few days, Yuwen Wushuang did not appear and Su Zimo and the others did not make any moves as well. However, they had already received definite news that Yuwen Wushuang would definitely appear at the North region Dao meet. As for Dao being Qian Yu, he should not be coming this time round. It was said that Glass Palace only sent a void reversion this time round to compete against Yuwen Wushuang for the spot of the number 1 Dao being in the North region. As time passed, the Golden Lion became increasingly nervous. He had been separated from Cuckoo for 9 years. He wasn't even sure if Cuckoo was still alive. He looked forward to their reunion. However, he was worried that something might happen and that Su Zimo, Night Spirit, and Nian Qi would be in danger because they stood up for him. This was the North region Dao meet. It was one of the biggest events in the cultivation world of the North region. Even the overlord of Wild Lion Ridge would not dare to lead his 10 million fiend demons here, let alone the 4 of them. There were not only void reversions at the Dao meet, there were also many Dharma-characteristic Dao lords. How were they going to handle it? The Golden Lion did not doubt Night Spirit's combat strength at all. However, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. If they were surrounded, they would most likely die. More and more cultivators were gathering in Qian Heaven City, and it became livelier. Over the past few days, news would spread from time to time. The appearance of any paragon would cause quite a stir. On this day, the North region Dao meet officially began. Su Zimo tidied his green robes and walked out of the room with Night Spirit, Nian Qi, and the Golden Lion. He bumped into Yulan and the others who were approaching. "Brother Su, you're finally willing to come out?" Yulan smiled. Uncle Jing nodded at Su Zimo as a form of greeting. The 2 princes hid behind Yulan and Uncle Zhang, not daring to raise their heads to look at Su Zimo. Su Zimo could not be bothered with the 2 of them. The North region Dao meet was held in the center of the city. In the middle of Qian Heaven City was a gigantic stone platform. The fights between cultivators at the North region Dao meet were conducted on the stone platform. Around the stone platform stood nearly 20 stone pillars. The stone pillars were extremely spacious and could accommodate at least a few hundred people. There were some chairs placed beside tea tables with many spirit fruits and fragrant tea that were set up. Only the top sects and factions of the North region were qualified to ascend the stone pillars. From above, one could look down at everyone and take in the entire view from the high ground. As for cultivators of small sects and factions or itinerant cultivators, they could only squeeze on the ground. By the time Su Zimo and the others arrived, Both sides of the street, the restaurants and roofs near the stone platform were already filled with people. A hint of envy appeared in Yulan's eyes as she looked at the cultivators on the stone pillars who were eating spirit fruits and drinking fragrant tea. Those are all paragons of major sects and factions. If I can befriend them, I can even unify the entire North region, let alone rebuild Great Yu. Yulan said softly. Suzimo smiled and asked instead, "What have you gained in the past few days?" Yulan's expression darkened as she shook her head. These paragons are insufferably arrogant and prideful. Who would be willing to help if there's no benefit? After a brief pause, Yulan continued, "However, it's all right. If I can meet Daobeing Wushuang, I believe that I'll definitely be able to move him. As long as he's willing to help, everything will be fine." Chapter 1149. Settle a Score. Chapter 1149. Settle a Score. Look, Daobeing Windflame is here. Daobeing Windflame, the paragon of Glass Palace in this generation. His combat strength is second only to Daobeing Glass back then. At the mention of Daobeing Glass, many cultivators had emotional expressions. Unknowingly, 10 years have passed since that calamity of the titular disciples. Someone sighed softly. 10 years ago, Suzimo fought against many titular disciples in the Dao inheritance ground and established his Dao heart. In that battle, 8 titular disciples died, and it was known as the calamity of the titular disciples. Daobeing Glass died within. Suddenly, a cultivator said, "If the desolate marshal appears, Daobeing Wushuang won't be qualified to be the #1 Daobeing of the North region, right?" The Witch-Gu calamity happened within the territories of the 4 dynasties. Not many people witnessed Suzimo's 2 attacks in the capital of Great Zhou and Ethereal Peak, and it was barely a year since not many people in the North region knew of his return. A cultivator at the side sneered. "Everyone, Desolate Marshal was crippled by a half-martial ancestor 10 years ago. Even if he reconstructs his body, how much of his past combat strength can he have?" Another cultivator said in a deep voice, "Desolate Marshal has offended too many factions. It's best if he remains ignoble. If he dares to appear, countless enemies will come knocking on his door." Yulan was delighted when she heard the discussions around her. Although these paragons could not help her restore her dynasty, if they got rid of Daobeing Desolate Marshal, it would mean that the greatest obstacle in her ambition would be removed. "Brother Su, did you hear that?" Yulan rolled her eyes at Suzimo and said proudly, "Desolate Marshal isn't invincible. He's already at the end of his road. As long as I release the news of his return, countless paragons will naturally attack and suppress him." Suzimo smiled indifferently and shook his head. "It's useless. They're just a bunch of useless people." Although it sounded natural coming from his mouth, it sounded way too arrogant to Yulan. Who would dare to call the paragons of the North region useless? Who was qualified? She frowned slightly, and her impression of Suzimo decreased significantly once more. Uncle Zheng could not help but sneer at the side. "What high-sounding sentiments! Why don't you give it a try during the battle between void reversions later? Let everyone see what you've got." "Not interested." Suzimo shook his head. He was here for Daobeing Wushuang. He was not bothered nor interested with the sparring between void reversions. "Look at how scared you are." The mockery in Uncle Zheng's eyes intensified as he said, "Don't worry. The purpose of this Dao meet is to exchange pointers and experience. Unless there's a deep feud, cultivators won't fight with their lives on the line." Suzimo smiled and did not argue. In that short period of time, Daobeing Windflame had already landed on a stone pillar with a calm expression, not even looking at the many cultivators beneath him. He had only one goal in coming here, to defeat Daobeing Wushuang. Glass Palace was the only immortal sect in the North region. The title of the #1 Daobeing of the North region had to be given to Glass Palace cultivators. Although Daobeing Windflame was alone, he occupied an entire stone pillar and no cultivators had any objections. Even the Dharma characteristic Dao lords present had to give him face. At that moment, almost all the paragons of the major sects and factions were gathered. Many cultivators of the Yuwen clan had arrived as well. Yuwen Wushuang was the only one who had not appeared. None of the cultivators present complained, nor were they displeased. That was because this person had a noble status, and it was only right for him to be late. After a while, a figure appeared in the distant horizon. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived above Qian Heaven City. That person was burly and wore bronze armor. A blood-red cloak fluttered behind him as he rode on a pure gold lion that emitted a powerful aura. The moment he arrived, the clamor in the crowd decreased. It was as though no one dared to speak loudly for fear of offending this paragon. Dao being Wushuang. After Dao being Wushuang appeared, Dao being Wind Flame, who was initially resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened them with a rainbow-colored glint in his eyes. At the same time, Dao being Wushuang looked towards Dao being Wind Flame. The gazes of the two paragons collided in midair like divine weapons, and sparks flew. Instantly, the atmosphere turned extremely tense. The void between the two paragons was filled with a strong killing intent. Neither of them noticed that in the dense crowd on the street, there was a group of people staring at them coldly. Is that him? Su Zimo glanced sideways at the golden lion. The golden lion nodded heavily with a ferocious glint in his eyes as he grit his teeth. That's him. I'll recognize him even if he turns into ashes. That's Cuckoo? Su Zimo's gaze landed on Yuwen Wushuang's mount. The lion was pure gold and did not have a single strand of multicolored fur. It truly looked extremely majestic. Yes. The golden lion gulped and said with a worried expression, "First, if you guys end up fighting, please don't injure Cuckoo." Yes. Su Zimo nodded. At that moment, everyone's attention was focused on the two paragons, Dao being Wushuang and Dao being Wind Flame. No one heard their conversation either. Dao being Wushuang's cultivation seems to have improved quite a bit. Don't worry, Dao being Wind Flame's inheritance of Glass Palace is definitely not to be trifled with. The cultivators discussed fervently. Yuwen Wushuang surveyed the surroundings and declared loudly, "Sorry for the wait, everyone. I've just gained some enlightenment and my cultivation has improved. That's why I'm late." A commotion broke out in the crowd when they heard that. Dao being Wushuang was already at the perfected void reversion realm previously, and his cultivation improved. Isn't that the same as reaching the half-step Dharma characteristic realm? Who can match him at the same cultivation realm? The pressure on Dao being Wind Flame will be immense now. Dao being Wushuang is exerting pressure on Dao being Wind Flame. A cultivator could tell what was going on and said, although Dao being Wushuang's statement is an explanation, it's actually meant for Dao being Wind Flame. The fight between the two paragons had already begun. All eyes were on this. Yulan looked at the armored man riding a lion in midair and could not help but exclaim, "This is a true paragon. This should be the bearing of a paragon." As she said that, she looked at Su Zimo. She wanted to tell Su Zimo that paragons did not have to rely on words. They could attract everyone's attention the moment they appeared. When she looked at Su Zimo, she realized that he was pushing through the crowd and walking forward. "Brother Su, where are you going?" Yulan was stunned and asked hurriedly, "To settle a score with someone." Su Zimo replied without turning back. Night Spirit, Nian Qi, and the Golden Lion followed behind him with menacing expressions. Yulan asked instinctively, "With who?" "Yuwen Wushuang." Su Zimo's voice sounded. Yulan was stunned as she looked at the back view that was leaving into the distance. Her impression of him that had gotten clearer once again turned blurry at the moment. Chapter 1150. Who are you? Chapter 1150. Who are you? In midair, Yuwen Wushuang and Dao being Wind Flame faced off with a grim atmosphere. But now, 3 humans and a beast suddenly barged into the battlefield, attracting countless gazes. Even Yuwen Wushuang and Dao being Wind Flame turned to look over. The 3 humans and a beast walked over slowly. Their leader was a man in green robes with refined features. Behind him was a black-robed man with a cold expression and a golden-haired girl. Right at the back, a golden lion limped in. There was nothing unique about the three of them and the beast. The only thing special was that their eyes were cold and murderous. Who were the three of them? What were they trying to do standing out at this moment? At that moment, there were already cultivators in the crowd who recognized Suzimo, and their expressions changed. The pure gold lion that Yuwen Wushuang was sitting on shuddered and looked at the golden lion with gentle and worried eyes. The golden lion suddenly shouted, "Cuckoo, I'm here to save you." "It's useless." The pure gold lion shook her head with a sorrowful expression and said in human tongue, "Go back, lion. Where did this demon beast come from? How dare you be so arrogant at the North Region Dao meet?" A Yuwen clan cultivator had long stood out and shouted, prepared to kill the golden lion on the spot. "I'll handle this matter." Yuwen Wushuang raised his hand slightly and shifted his gaze to the golden lion, smiling. "So, it's you. Fufu. How dare you? Have you forgotten what I told you before?" Yuwen Wushuang's tone was calm, but there was a hint of ferocity in his smile. "I've said it before. If you dare to look for me again, I'll break all your bones bit by bit." He grinned with a chilling, killing intent in his tone. His attention was entirely focused on the golden lion, as though he had not seen Suzimo and the other two. Or rather, even if he saw them, he did not care. Crazy. He's really crazy. Uncle Zhang shook his head. The four of them are void reversions, and they want to challenge Dao Being Wushuang. This time round, Yulan did not say anything. Her eyes were fixed on Suzimo's face, as though she wanted to make something out of it. "Yuwen Wushuang." Right then, Suzimo spoke slowly. The moment he said that name, a commotion broke out. Right now, Yuwen Wushuang was the #1 Dao being of the North region and was notorious. Anyone of the same cultivation realm would have to address him respectfully as Dao Being Wushuang. Who would dare call him by his name? It was only then that Yuwen Wushuang turned to Suzimo and the others and sighed gently. "It's been many years since anyone has been so rude to me. Little lion, your helper is truly impolite." All the cultivators present could sense the killing intent in Yuwen Wushuang's tone. Many cultivators looked at Suzimo and the others as though they were looking at a few dead people. Of course, there were also some cultivators who had grim expressions and looked at Suzimo in disbelief, trembling slightly as though they had thought of something. "Oh." Suzimo replied indifferently, "What a coincidence. There aren't many people who dare to be so rude to me all these years as well." That was the truth. In the Dao inheritance ground, all the cultivators who dared to attack him had already turned into cold corpses. "Yuwen Wushuang, I have 2 scores to settle with you for coming here." Suzimo pointed at the pure gold lion in midair and said, "First, you should not have snatched that lion and forced her to be your mount. Second, you shouldn't have broken his leg." Suzimo pointed at the golden lion and continued, "Ha ha ha ha." Yuwen Wushuang reared his head in laughter, as though he had heard the funniest thing in the world. "So, you're here to settle scores with me?" When the paragons of the other upper sects heard that, they shook their heads incredulously as well. A Yuwen clan cultivator stood out and said coldly, "Are you even worthy of challenging Dao Being Wushuang? Take my strike." The void reversion could not hold it in any longer and leaped down from the stone pillar. He summoned a long saber from his storage bag and slashed down towards Suzimo's head with the might of heaven and earth. 5 dermic patterns burst forth from the saber. It was a perfect Dao Being dermic weapon. Before the saber descended, a powerful sharpness burst forth, as though it could destroy everything before it. Yulan's expression changed slightly. The fact that any random cultivator of the Yuwen clan already possessed such combat strength was evidence of how strong the 4 gentry clans were. The other paragons nodded secretly as well. Coupled with dermic powers and blood chi, the might of that slash was pushed to its limits with the momentum of the descent and could not be underestimated. Yuwen Wushuang watched everything calmly without any intention of attacking. Suzimo stood on the spot motionlessly. Even when he was enveloped by the saber aura, his expression did not change at all. His eyes were deep and emotionless like an ancient well. It's over. That person is scared silly. There's a price to pay for being arrogant. Someone sneered. All of a sudden, Su Zimo opened his mouth and spat out a single word. Scram. His voice was like thunder. The discussions in the crowd had just started when they were suppressed by that shout and returned to silence. The cultivators who were closer were caught off guard and were shocked. Many cultivators felt their ears buzzing and temporarily lost their hearing. They could no longer hear anything. The cultivators were stunned and looked at the battlefield in a daze. None of them could imagine that the roar came from a cultivator. The void reversion of the Yuwen clan was still in midair when he was struck by the sound domain attack. He shuddered and his gaze turned sluggish. His mind went blank and he lost consciousness, falling from midair like a meteor. The saber aura in his hands dissipated immediately. The light on his saber dissipated as well. Bang! The void reversion fell onto the stone platform heavily and did not move at all. He had already fainted and was unconscious. Su Zimo had used the power of Thunderclap Kill for that roar. Although his green lotus true body received the nourishment of the primordial divine spring, his bloodline was still not considered strong. If this was his dragon true body, that single roar would have shattered the void reversion's essence spirit, and he would have died on the spot instead of merely fainting. Even so, that move was shocking enough. The initially restless crowd quietened down instantly. Who would dare to underestimate someone who could knock out a void reversion with a single roar? Who are you? Yuwen Wushuang narrowed his eyes and asked slowly. Desolate martial wishes to establish a Tao and impart martial arts to all living beings. Right then, a cultivator stood up slowly and glared at Su Zimo, saying slowly, Tao being desolate martial, you're finally out of seclusion. Pissed. Tao being desolate martial. Those words seemed to have a magical power that caused the entire Qian heaven city to fall silent. Yulan's mouth was agape as her mind buzzed with a blank expression. How could that be? Su Zimo. He was desolate martial? Uncle Zhang was also dumbfounded and could not snap out of his daze for a moment. It's him. The prince of Great Xia looked like he had gone mad as he yelled with a horrified expression. I knew it. He must have killed the imperial advisors. Chapter 1151. Shocking Everything. Chapter 1151. Shocking Everything. When Yulan learned that the green-robed cultivator accompanying her along the way was Tao being desolate martial, there seemed to be an explanation for many things. Tao being desolate martial. That peerless paragon who once dominated the North region and suppressed countless paragons to obtain the #1 spot of the phenomenon ranking and personally buried 8 titular disciples. That strongest monster incarnate in history that many super sects were wary of and even attracted a half-martial ancestor expert to attack. He was the #1 figure in Tianhuang mainland who caused the heavens and earth to quake when he established his Tao heart and wanted to change the fate of all living beings. Everyone present knew that Su Zimo had once been severely injured by a half-martial ancestor expert and barely survived. His combat strength was greatly reduced, and he might even have fallen from grace and was no longer glorious. However, at that moment, when he appeared, many cultivators recalled the miraculous legends of Desolate Martial. No one could ignore his past. Desolate Martial? That Tao title alone possessed a suffocating and unstoppable might. Yulan looked around. Some were stunned, some were fearful, some were terrified, and some were excited. Although the cultivators of the Tao meet had different expressions, everyone remained silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. Everyone's attention was drawn to the appearance of Tao being Wind Flame and Yuwen Wushuang earlier on. She was stunned as well. But now, Su Zimo's appearance pushed the shock in her heart to its limits. She once said that a true paragon should be the center of attention. But now, she realized that she was wrong. A true paragon could intimidate everything. Tao being desolate martial. The weight of those words caused all the cultivators to feel an omnipresent pressure. Suddenly, countless questions flashed through Yulan's mind. For the past few days, they had traveled together. Why did Desolate Marshal not attack her? Was he afraid of Uncle Zheng? Or was it because his combat strength had decreased and he was not confident? Or was there some other reason? What did the deaths of the two imperial advisors have to do with Desolate Marshal? Could it be as the two princes said? Were the two imperial advisors killed by Desolate Marshal? On the stone platform, Yuwen Wushuang gradually came to his senses. After all, he was the #1 Dao being of the North region and was also a paragon that was hard to come by in 1,000 years. He was invincible, had a strong character, and never experienced defeat before. How could someone like that be intimidated by a Dao title? Desolate Marshal, to think that it would be you. Yuwen Wushuang had a calm expression as he sighed gently. What a pity. The moment your body was destroyed and the creation Green Lotus shattered, your era had already passed. Many cultivators felt relieved when they heard that. That's right, Dao being Desolate Marshal was no longer the monster incarnate of the past. What was there to be afraid of? Desolate Marshal's greatest reliance was his bloodline power. Now that he had reconstructed his body and lost his divine phoenix bone, what trump cards did he have left? Desolate Marshal, you came at the right time. More than 100 years ago, you fought for the vermilion fruit in the great Qian ruins and killed a paragon of our sect. It's time for you to settle this score. On the stone pillar, Dao being 100 Ghost of the Yin Ghost sect stood up slowly and glared at Su Zimo with a dark expression. Dao being Blazing Sun from one of the 10 upper sects, Blaze Columbus Valley, suddenly burst into flames and said in a deep voice, "You killed many disciples of my sect in the battle of the great Qian ruins. It's time for you to pay with your life." Dao being Zimu of the heaven-piercing sword sect, one of the North region twin swords, suddenly said with a sharp gaze, "In the great Qian ruins, you killed a paragon of our sect. I've been wanting to test my 3-foot green sword on you for a long time." That was merely a casual remark. If it was 10 years ago, which of the paragons present would dare to challenge Su Zimo? But now, one after another, the paragons stood out and glared at Su Zimo with unfriendly expressions and murderous auras while spouting all sorts of reasons. In reality, the paragon of heavenly piercing sword sect did not die in Su Zimo's hands. Instead, he was killed by Dugu Jian. However, at that moment, the blame was entirely on Su Zimo. Yuwen Wushuang rode on the pure gold lion and smiled indifferently with a mocking look in his eyes. He did not even have to do anything, and Dao being Desolate Marshal was already overwhelmed. Dao being Wind Flame stood up slowly as well and said sternly, "Desolate Marshal, you really shouldn't have come. You want to attack as well?" Su Zimo asked with a smile. Dao being Glass died in your hands. If I kill you, I'll become this generation's titular disciple of Glass Palace. Dao being Wind Flame's voice carried a hint of killing intent. The crowd was in a frenzy. The situation was changing rapidly. Su Zimo had become the target of everyone. In the crowd, Uncle Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. "Princess, you can rest assured now," Uncle Zheng whispered. "This Desolate Marshal is arrogant and conceited. He doesn't know how to judge the situation. Even without you stepping in, these paragons will kill him." "Yes?" Yulan replied distractedly. She should have been delighted that the greatest obstacle towards the restoration of her dynasty was about to be removed. However, for some reason, she did not feel as happy as she had imagined when she saw this. There were many Dharma-characteristic Dao Lords in the Dao meet. However, none of them stood out. They merely communicated with their spirit consciousnesses and watched coldly from the sidelines. They were well aware of how many conjoint body mighty figures attacked Dragon Burial Valley 10 years ago. Dao being Desolate Marshal had a Mahayana patriarch backing him. Furthermore, the patriarch had once said that he would not interfere in a fight of the same cultivation realm. However, if any expert of any sect tried to murder Desolate Marshal across a major cultivation realm again, that patriarch would take revenge. We just have to watch from the sidelines. Dao Lord Mu Yu was a Dharma characteristic expert of the Duanmu aristocratic family. Dao Lord Bai Ling, a Dharma characteristic expert of the Ouyang aristocratic family, smiled indifferently. That's right. With so many void reversion paragons gathered here, Desolate Marshal will definitely die today. To all of them, notwithstanding the fact that there were peerless paragons like Yuwen Wushuang and Daobeing Windflame. Even if everyone were to take turns fighting Su Zimo, the latter would be exhausted to death. On the stone platform, in the face of the killing intent of many void reversion paragons, Su Zimo's expression was calm as he said slowly, I'm here today to look for Yuwen Wushuang. It's best for those uninvolved to not interfere. His statement was truly a reminder out of goodwill. He had only two motives for coming to the North Region Dao meet, Yuwen Wushuang and Daobeing Qian Yu of Glass Palace. However, some people were indifferent towards Su Zimo's reminder. Desolate Marshal, this is the North Region Dao meet. You can't be arrogant here. A void reversion stood out and strode towards Su Zimo. His eyes seemed to conjure the sun, moon, and stars with a shocking aura. It's Daobeing Stellar Cloud of Stellar Luna Sect. I heard that Daobeing Stellar Cloud is only 100 years old. He's already at the void reversion realm at such a young age and has a bright future ahead of him. Some cultivators whispered. On the stone platform, Su Zimo stood motionlessly without even looking at Daobeing Stellar Cloud. Daobeing Stellar Cloud felt that he was being looked down upon and was enraged. Without even testing the waters, he released Stellar Luna Sect's secret skill right away. He wanted to release his killing move and not give Su Zimo any chance to react. A one-hit kill. A secret skill had already formed in front of Daobeing Stellar Cloud. An ancient gigantic star spun slowly and crushed over with a powerful aura. Right then, Nianqi turned around slowly. Chapter 1152. Overlooking the same level. Chapter 1152. Overlooking the same level. A gigantic star that emitted a savage aura arrived with a bang. Nianqi strode forward and did not use any dermic arts. She merely clenched her fists and her blood chi burst forth with a golden glow. She clenched her fist and punched. In the face of this star, Nianqi's fist was as insignificant as a speck of dust. However, when that speck of dust collided with the gigantic star, an earth-shaking and deafening bang sounded. Boom! A massive shockwave spread in all directions. Nianqi did not take a single step back as her golden hair fluttered. Crack, crack, crack. Suddenly, terrifying cracking sounds could be heard on the battlefield. Under countless gazes, cracks appeared on the surface of the gigantic star and spread rapidly. It filled the entire star. Bang! Immediately after, the star exploded and countless rocks formed from dermic powers flew everywhere, causing dust to billow. Blood drained from Daobeing Stellar Cloud's face after he received such a serious injury. His entire body shuddered and he flew backwards, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Who do you think you are? How dare you attack my young master? Nianqi looked at Daobeing Stellar Cloud, who was sprawled on the ground with a dispirited expression, and scoffed coldly. At that moment, everyone's attention was focused on the golden-haired girl. Prior to this, Su Zimo's appearance and his title as Desolate Marshal shocked everyone. Almost no one paid attention to the two people and one beast beside him. It was only at this moment that everyone realized that this girl was not to be trifled with either. What surprised everyone the most was that such a beautiful and powerful young lady seemed to be a maidservant of Desolate Marshal. Yulan was dumbfounded. This petite girl who seemed harmless and traveled together with them had actually released such a terrifying power. The paragon of Stellar Luna Sect could not even withstand a single blow from Nianqi. The bloodline of the god race flowed through Nianqi's body. Apart from some of the top paragons and monster incarnates, Nianqi could sweep through almost anyone of the same cultivation realm. Not bad, not bad. Yuwen Wushuang had a composed expression as he said with a smile, Little lion, the two helpers you found are rather strong. Yuwen, I'll acknowledge that it was because I wasn't skilled enough that my leg was crippled by you. The golden lion grit his teeth. As long as you return Cuckoo to me, we'll leave right now. Sure. Yuwen Wushuang nodded with a mocking gaze. Kneel down and beg me? Ha 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 ha. A fiend demon actually came to our North Region Dao meet to negotiate terms with the number 1 Dao being of the North Region. What a joke. An ear-piercing laughter sounded from the crowd. Night Spirit's gaze turned cold. Nian Qi glared furiously as well. The golden lion's expression turned ferocious and his eyes revealed a look of struggle. After a moment of silence, he finally lowered his head and limped out. Lion, don't. The pure gold lion could not bear to see this. However, the moment she opened her mouth, Yuwen Wushuang sealed her words with a single thought. She had already signed a blood oath with Yuwen Wushuang. He could kill the pure gold lion with a single thought. The smile in Yuwen Wushuang's eyes intensified when he saw the golden lion's actions. You might have misunderstood. I wasn't merely referring to you. All 4 of you have to kneel and beg me. The laughter in the crowd gradually died down. Everyone felt their hearts skip a beat. It was as though a storm was about to descend. It was nothing to make a demon beast kneel. However, Yuwen Wushuang's intention was for Dao being desolate martial to kneel before him as well. 10 years ago, even Dharma-characteristic Dao lords would not dare to make such a request in front of Dao being desolate martial, let alone void reversions. Very good. Ever since I became famous, no one has dared to speak to me like that. Su Zimo looked at Yuwen Wushuang coldly and nodded. You're the first, and I. Su Zimo suddenly opened his mouth and let out a Sanskrit sound. At the same time, a gigantic golden palm appeared beside Yuwen Wushuang and grabbed him viciously. Charge! Yuwen Wushuang willed the pure gold lion to carry him and charge towards Su Zimo. There was no way the pure gold lion could betray him since she signed a blood oath with him. However, at that moment, the pure gold lion stood motionlessly on the spot despite the risk of breaking the blood oath that would result in death from a reverse blood flow. Beast, how dare you? Yuwen Wushuang was enraged. Ma! Right then, a second Sanskrit sound descended. Demon subduing seal. OM. The third Sanskrit sound. Fiend suppression seal. 3 dermic seals and 3 Sanskrit sounds echoed through the world as they enveloped Yuwen Wushuang's body and released a suffocating attack. Initially, Yuwen Wushuang wanted to use his consciousness to kill the pure gold lion. However, against such an attack, he would die if he was even momentarily distracted. Combined with the Daming Sutra, the offensive power of the 3 Daming dermic seals had reached their limits. Yuwen Wushuang did not dare to be careless. Leaping up, he conjured hand seals with both hands and hollered, Wind God Slash. A series of sharp saber beams that were condensed from dermic powers burst forth from his body. They were blinding and sliced open the 3 golden palms that were approaching him. Break! Yuwen Wushuang roared and withdrew a gigantic axe from his storage bag before slashing down viciously. Boom! The golden Buddha palms shattered into specks of golden light. Just as Yuwen Wushuang was about to make a move, Su Zimo's attack descended once more like a torrential storm, not giving him any chance to catch his breath. Qi! An incomparably resplendent sword Qi burst forth, creating a vast expanse of white. Stars filled the skies above the firmaments in a chaotic manner. When the heaven's killing intent is released, the stars are shifted out of alignment. Heaven-slaying sword Qi. This was the most terrifying killing move among Su Zimo's many dermic arts. With his current cultivation, he could slash out 3 sword Qi consecutively. However, Su Zimo did not release everything at once. The killing power of the 3 sword Qi was way too terrifying. He was worried that he would kill Yuwen Wushuang right away. Yuwen Wushuang had signed a blood oath with the pure gold lion. If Su Zimo killed him directly, the pure gold lion's essence spirit would be severely injured as well. Furthermore, even if he killed Yuwen Wushuang directly, he might not be able to free the golden lion from its mental demons. Everyone was shocked when the heaven-slaying sword Qi appeared, not to mention the void reversions present. Even many Dharma-characteristic Dao lords were shocked and looked wary. Even they felt threatened by the sharpness of the sword Qi. What a terrifying sword Qi! To think that desolate Marshall's dermic arts would be so terrifying. Humph! Suddenly, a cultivator sneered. All of you think that Desolate Marshal's combat strength has decreased significantly after losing his body. However, there's something you guys might not know. What? Someone could not help but ask. The cultivator said with a deep voice, back in the Dao Inheritance ground battle, Desolate Marshal's physique and bloodline were both suppressed because he had demonic blood flowing through him as well as the divine phoenix bone on him. 10 years ago, this cultivator had entered the Dao Inheritance ground and witnessed those major battles personally. What does that mean? The cultivators at the side still did not understand. The cultivator said slowly, "This means that when Desolate Marshal killed the 8 titular disciples, he did not use his physique or bloodline at all. You guys thought that his physique and bloodline were strong and that he was invincible in melee combat. However, you guys don't know that Desolate Marshal's dermic arts are so strong that they can look down on those of the same cultivation realm and destroy everything." Chapter 1153, Fury of Thunder. Chapter 1153, Fury of Thunder. Yuwen Wushuang swung the gigantic axe in his hands. The moment he charged forward, his vision was shrouded by a blinding light. An extremely sharp aura surged over. Before the sharpness descended, he felt as though his body was about to be torn into two. Ah! Yuwen Wushuang raised his head and howled as the blood qi in his body exploded. His bloodline rumbled and surged. His blood qi was vibrant. It was only a step lower than the tsunami blood level and was considered top tier as well. Yuwen Wushuang gripped his gigantic axe tightly and released his blood qi. Dermic powers surged within his body as his black hair danced. Narrowing his eyes, he slashed towards the incoming sword qi. The heaven-slaying sword qi had already forced out all his strength. Right then, Su Zimo slapped his storage bag and removed a dark gray mountain from it, throwing it towards Yuwen Wushuang. It was the ancient unique treasure, the Mystic Magnet Mountain. When he took out the Mystic Magnet Mountain, it was only the size of a hand and could be supported by a single palm. However, as Su Zimo injected dermic powers, the Mystic Magnet Mountain expanded against the wind and grew rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a mountain. The larger the Mystic Magnet Mountain, the stronger the power of magnetism it emitted. Given Su Zimo's current cultivation, he could raise the Mystic Magnet Mountain to 100 feet with his full strength. Although it was far from a true mountain peak, the sudden descent of the 100-feet-tall mountain was shocking enough. Initially, the gigantic axe Yuwen Wushuang wielded could have struck the heaven-slaying sword qi. However, due to the appearance of the Mystic Magnet Mountain, it released a powerful magnetic force and pulled his gigantic axe away from its original trajectory. Yuwen Wushuang's blood qi was strong, and even with the suction of the Mystic Magnet Mountain, he could still maintain his balance. However, the gigantic axe in his hands shifted slightly and barely missed the incoming heaven-slaying sword qi. Although it seemed like a hair's breadth difference, it was enough to determine the outcome of this battle. Yuwen Wushuang's expression changed. In a flash, he made the best decision. He abandoned the gigantic axe in his hands. That gigantic axe was his destiny dermic weapon and could unleash immense destructive power in his hands. However, under the shroud of the Mystic Magnet Mountain, his destiny dermic weapon became a burden. He could not spare any effort to defend against the heaven-slaying sword qi either. With a single thought, Yuwen Wushuang transformed the gigantic axe into a stream of light and stuffed it back into his storage bag. At the same time, he conjured hand seals with his left hand and took out a few talismans from his storage bag with his right, ripping them apart. Hum, hum, hum. A series of defensive barriers formed in front of him in an attempt to defend against the sharpness of the heaven-slaying sword qi. Poof, poof, poof. However, in the face of the heaven-slaying sword qi, those talismans were like pieces of paper that were pierced one after another. 6 trigram dermic mirror. With that delay, Yuwen Wushuang's dermic art was already formed. A pure gold round mirror appeared in his palm. Mysterious patterns were etched on it, and it spun continuously, emitting a blazing light. The series of exchanges displayed Yuwen Wushuang's immense combat strength, keen talent, and brilliant techniques. He was indeed worthy of being called the #1 Dao being of the North region. However, Yuwen Wushuang's rise was way too short. At most, it was only 10 years. What happened 10 years ago? 8 titular disciples, the strongest void reversions of Tianhuang mainland, were killed by Su Zimo in the Dao inheritance ground. The reason why Yuwen Wushuang could rise was because Dao Being Glass died in Su Zimo's hands. In other words, if Dao Being Glass was still around, Yuwen Wushuang might not be able to stand out. However, after 10 years, Su Zimo, who once killed 8 titular disciples in the Dao inheritance ground, became even stronger, and the killing power of the heaven-slaying sword Qi was even more immense. Clang! The heaven-slaying sword Qi broke through 3 defensive barriers and struck the center of the 6 trigram dermic mirror. Crack! 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 Accompanied by a cracking sound, cracks appeared on the 6 trigram dermic mirror. The entire mirror was covered in the blink of an eye. Yuwen Wushuang's expression changed. The killing power of that sword Qi was too strong, and it broke through 3 of his defensive talismans and a defensive dermic art. However, the remnant sharpness did not stop. There was no need for more. 2 consecutive sword Qi could kill him here. Yuwen Wushuang felt an immense pressure that suffocated him. It was as though all his methods could not withstand a single blow from Desolate Marshal. Desolate Marshal had a reconstructed body, and the power of his body's bloodline was definitely a weakness. Yuwen Wushuang wanted to close the distance and engage in melee combat with Su Zimo right away, but he could not. Poof! The sword Qi pierced through the 6 trigram dermic mirror. Yuwen Wushuang wanted to stop and dodge, but it was already too late. Poof! A flash of blood appeared. Yuwen Wushuang's palm was pierced by the heaven-slaying sword Qi. The killing power within the sword Qi spread along the wound rapidly and destroyed all life force in the palm. On the surface, Yuwen Wushuang's palm was merely pierced with a bloody hole. However, in the blink of an eye, the meridians and blood vessels in the palm were severed and the life force within was destroyed by the heaven-slaying sword Qi. That palm was already crippled. The sword Qi did not stop and stabbed towards Yuwen Wushuang's chest. Clang! The sword Qi landed on his armor and shot out a fiery light before dissipating. The cultivators were dumbfounded. Throughout the entire process, everyone was so nervous that they forgot to breathe. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they saw the sword Qi dissipate. Even bystanders could feel such pressure against the heaven-slaying sword Qi, let alone Yuwen Wushuang, who was enveloped by it. A few drops of sweat had already appeared on his forehead. His armor was also a Khanate Dao Being dermic weapon. However, the remnant sword Qi still left a clear white mark on his armor. If not for the protection of the armor, he would have been defeated and severely injured by the sword Qi. Yuwen Wushuang had just escaped a calamity and was slightly relieved. However, he had not expected that Su Zimo would not give him a chance to catch his breath. At the same time that the sword Qi dissipated from the 6 trigram dermic mirror, Su Zimo charged forward and extended his arm, pointing at Yuwen Wushuang as he hollered, "Kill! Thunderclap kill!" A sound domain secret skill was released. If it was a normal battle, Yuwen Wushuang's blood Qi and body might not have been affected by Thunderclap kill. However, at that moment, he was at his most relaxed state when he was suddenly struck by Thunderclap kill. His entire body shuddered and his mind went blank. The moment Thunderclap kill descended, a gigantic thunderbolt descended from above his head. It was curved and coiled with lightning as it struck Yuwen Wushuang's head. Snap! A thunderclap sounded. The Purple Thunder Manual and Green Thunder Manual combined to form the Great Void Spirit Refinement section. This was one of the dermic arts, the Fury of Thunder. Yuwen Wushuang's armor could defend against the sharpness of dermic weapons, but it could not defend against the impact of the Fury of Thunder. Thunderclap kill and Fury of Thunder descended at the same time, and Yuwen Wushuang was struck silly. Green smoke billowed from his body, and his hair was coiled as he stood motionlessly with a dull gaze. Chapter 1154, A God-Given Opportunity. Chapter 1154. A God-Given Opportunity. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo arrived beside Yuwen Wushuang. With a wave of his hand, he summoned the latter's essence spirit and condensed it in his palm. Victory was decided. The crowd fell into an uproar. From the moment Su Zimo attacked till the end of the battle, he merely took a dozen breaths. Nobody expected that this battle would end in such a short period of time. The number 1 Dao being of the North region posed almost no resistance to Su Zimo, and his essence spirit was captured. Su Zimo's series of attacks were the best dermic arts among the immortal and Buddhist Das. It was already amazing for Yuwen Wushuang to be able to break free from the attacks of the 3 damning dermic seals and defend against the sharpness of the heaven-slaying sword Qi. If it was any other paragon, they might not even be able to defend against 3 damning dermic seals. When Yulan saw that, she had a conflicted expression and her heart skipped a beat. Perhaps no one could understand what she was feeling right now. The reason why she came this time round was to ask Yuwen Wushuang to take action to suppress Desolate Martial. However, she had not expected that Yuwen Wushuang's essence spirit would be captured by Desolate Martial in a dozen breaths. That was truly ridiculous. What was even more ridiculous was that the Dao being Desolate Martial she wanted to suppress was Su Zimo, who was traveling with her. Uncle Zhang sighed faintly and said softly, "Princess, it seems like you were right back then. This person is indeed not simple." Yulan smiled bitterly without saying anything. Her first impression of Su Zimo was that he was special and not simple. That was the reason why she invited him over to befriend him. However, she had not expected this person to be so special. The entire battle ended too quickly. Even many Dharma characteristic Dao lords could not react in time, let alone the void reversions present. Desolate Martial, stop? A Dharma characteristic of the Yuwen clan stood up and frowned, saying in a deep voice, "Desolate Martial, this is the North Region Dao meet. Everyone is here to spar and exchange pointers. You can't fight to the death." "That's right." Dao Lord Mu Yu of the Duanmu aristocratic family nodded and declared, "Desolate Martial, the outcome has been decided. Release him." "We can't fight to the death?" Su Zimo sneered coldly and said indifferently, "I came to the North Region Dao meet to settle scores with him. I'm supposed to release him just because you want me to?" Right now, Yuwen Wushuang's essence spirit was in Su Zimo's palm. Su Zimo could kill Yuwen Wushuang with a single thought. Even if the Dharma characteristic Dao lords present wanted to save him, they would have to be cautious. "Desolate Martial, let's make a deal." Yuwen Wushuang judged the situation. Seeing that he could not escape, he said in a deep voice, "If you kill me, the essence spirit of that pure gold lion will be severely injured as well. How about I break my blood oath with her and you release me?" The golden lion's heart skipped a beat, and he wanted to speak but hesitated. As long as Cuckoo could get out of this unscathed, he was willing to trade his own life, let alone spare Yuwen Wushuang. Although his leg was broken by Yuwen Wushuang, as long as Cuckoo was fine, the suffering was nothing. However, now that Su Zimo was in control of the situation, he could not say much and merely looked at the pure gold lion with a worried expression. "All right." Seemingly sensing the golden lion's intentions, Su Zimo pondered for a moment before nodding. "Release the blood oath and I'll spare your life." "That won't do. You have to make a Dao oath. What if you renege on your words?" Yuwen Wushuang was still worried. "If I say that I'll spare your life, I won't kill you." Su Zimo's expression turned cold as he exerted strength in his palm and squeezed Yuwen Wushuang's essence spirit, saying frostily, "Don't push your luck." "All right." Sensing the killing intent in Su Zimo's heart, Yuwen Wushuang did not dare to make any more demands. He chanted a mental sutra, and a drop of soul blood floated out of his consciousness. It looked like a lion and emitted a faint demonic qi as it flew towards the pure gold lion. The pure gold lion hurried forward excitedly. The moment the drop of soul blood returned to her body, she shuddered and the invisible shackles that were initially covering her body were suddenly released. She was overjoyed and roared into the skies, charging towards the golden lion. 9 years later, they finally reunited. Their foreheads were pressed tightly together. The two lions did not move nor say a word. They merely looked at each other affectionately with tears shimmering in their eyes. Many cultivators were touched when they saw that. Although they were only two demon beasts, many cultivators could feel the joy and gratitude of their reunion at that moment. All living beings had spirits and emotions. It was the same for demons. Nianqi smiled. Even Night Spirit's eyes flashed with an imperceptible gentleness. "Desolate Marshal, let go of me," Yuwen Wushuang hollered. Su Zimo released his grip. Yuwen Wushuang's essence spirit turned into a stream of light and entered his glabella instantly, returning to his consciousness to regain control of his body. Endless indignance and resentment surged in his heart. Prior to this, he was the #1 Dao being of the North region, and his reputation had already reached its peak. No one in the same realm could match him. However, in just a dozen breaths, all his glory and past were shattered by the green-robed cultivator before him. "We can't let this matter go just like that." Yuwen Wushuang lowered his head slightly and glanced at Su Zimo, who was standing not far away from him. Suddenly, a bold thought popped into his mind. Previously, he wanted to fight Su Zimo in melee combat, but did not succeed. But now, they were merely an arm's length apart. Wasn't this a God-given opportunity? If he suddenly attacked and killed Dao being Desolate Marshal here, it wouldn't matter even if he was defeated earlier on. Although this method was dishonorable, everything was worth it as long as it could kill Dao being Desolate Marshal. His reputation would not decrease. Instead, it would increase. The moment that thought flashed through his mind, he could no longer contain it, and it grew rapidly. Yuwen Wushuang felt his heart thumping wildly. Steady. He took a deep breath and tried his best to stabilize his emotions. He refused to look at Su Zimo, afraid that he might alert the latter and fail. Kill? All of a sudden, without any warning, Yuwen Wushuang suddenly raised his head. His eyes shone with a cold glint as he roared and lunged towards Su Zimo. However, the moment he raised his head, his heart skipped a beat. Unknowingly, Su Zimo had already turned around and was looking at him with a fake smile. That pair of deep eyes seemed to have seen through all his thoughts. Not good. Yuwen Wushuang was alarmed. He was prepared. Right then, Su Zimo's eyes flashed with a demonic glint. His pupils were pitch black as though they were emitting a strange demonic power. Yuwen Wushuang was stunned. He exchanged glances with the pair of demonic eyes and felt a little dazed. His movement techniques, speed, and actions turned sluggish. However, Yuwen Wushuang woke up before long. Ocular technique. His heart skipped a beat and revealed a flaw. Su Zimo's ocular technique had taken advantage of it and affected his mind. Yuwen Wushuang's heart sank gradually. Although he woke up swiftly and was merely dazed for a brief moment, that was enough for an opponent of Desolate Marshal's level. A palm had already appeared above his head. It was Desolate Marshal's palm. Chapter 1155, An Eye for an Eye. Chapter 1155, An Eye for an Eye. This change happened even faster. With a single mistake, the battle was over. Yuwen Wushuang stood motionlessly in front of Dao being Desolate Marshal with a pale face. Although he tried her best to remain calm, one could still see the panic in his eyes. Dao being Desolate Marshal's palm was right above Yuwen Wushuang's head. As long as he exerted strength in his palm, Yuwen Wushuang would die without a chance for his essence spirit to leave his body. How could this be? Why is Dao being Wushuang and Dao being Desolate Marshal's hands again? Many cultivators were confused and did not manage to witness what happened in that brief moment. A cultivator was speechless. Earlier on, Yuwen Wushuang suddenly attacked Dao being Desolate Marshal, but the cultivator paused and frowned slightly, confusion flashing through his eyes. What happened? Speak. Someone urged impatiently. The cultivator had no choice but to continue, however. I don't know what happened. At that critical juncture, Yuwen Wushuang was dazed for a moment, and even his movement technique paused briefly. It's that momentary pause that allowed Dao being desolate martial to seize the initiative and subdue him first. The cultivators were stunned. Time has barely passed, but the number 1 Dao being of the North region was subdued by desolate martial once again. It seems like it's even shorter this time round. Could it be that Yuwen Wushuang is so useless that he can't even withstand a single breath against desolate martial? Disbelief filled the eyes of the cultivators. Uncle Zhang, what happened just now? Yulan could not help but ask. She had been paying attention to the two people on the battlefield the entire time, but she could not understand what happened in that instant they exchanged blows. It was as though Yuwen Wushuang had lost his soul all of a sudden and was captured. Uncle Zhang said in a deep voice, "It's an ocular technique." Yuwen Wushuang was the first to show signs of fear. His mind was shaken and an opening appeared, so he was affected by Desolate Martial's ocular technique, resulting in the current outcome. This Desolate Martial is even more terrifying than we imagined, Uncle Zhang lamented. He was right. What Su Zimo released was the heavenly fiend eyes from the Tao Heart Fiend Seed Sutra that could affect a cultivator's mind. To be fair, it was already rare for Yuwen Wushuang to be able to break free of the power of the heavenly fiend eyes and regain consciousness. Su Zimo's fiend technique was extremely powerful. That was because his memories contained the cultivation insights and comprehension of a half-martial ancestor of the fiend sections. Desolate Martial, what are you trying to do? The Dharma characteristic Tao Lord of the Yuwen clan had just sat down when he stood up again and shouted with a dark expression. Su Zimo was expressionless as he shook his head. You shouldn't be asking me that question. You should be asking him what he wants. Desolate Martial, you can't kill me. Yuwen Wushuang did not dare to act recklessly. Gritting his teeth, he said, You promised me earlier. You're Tao being Desolate Martial, and you can't go back on your words. But I've already spared you once earlier on. You're the one who didn't cherish the opportunity, Su Zimo said coldly. Yuwen Wushuang's heart was filled with fear. Su Zimo was right. Their transaction earlier on was complete. He released the blood oath and Su Zimo spared his life. However, he was the one who asked for the current situation. Desolate Martial, you can't kill me. Yuwen Wushuang took a deep breath and said slowly, If you dare to kill me, I can guarantee that you won't be able to leave Qian Heaven City. Oh. Su Zimo's gaze intensified as he inched closer to Yuwen Wushuang and asked coldly, Are you threatening me? He exerted strength in his palm and pinched the top of Yuwen Wushuang's head. The immense force caused the latter's head to cave in slightly. The skull let out a terrifying sound, as though it would explode the next moment. Yuwen Wushuang was drenched in sweat from the intense pain and almost fainted. Just as he was about to break down, Su Zimo released his grip and the suffocating feeling of death vanished once more. Yuwen Wushuang panted heavily with lingering fear as he looked at the refined cultivator before him as though he was looking at a demon. Killing you is letting you off too easily. Sliding his palm down, Su Zimo patted Yuwen Wushuang on the cheek and said coldly, I still have a debt to settle with you. Yuwen Wushuang's heart sank. Su Zimo continued, That lion is my sworn brother, and you broke his leg. What do you think we should do? What do you want? Yuwen Wushuang asked with clenched fists. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Su Zimo said slowly, You broke one of his legs, so one of yours will have to be broken. How dare you? Yuwen clan's Dharma characteristic Tao Lord was enraged and shouted, Desolate Martial, although you're a human, you're willing to travel with fiend demons and become sworn brothers. Now, you want to harm the paragons of the human race for a fiend demon? Tao Lord Muyu frowned slightly as well and said sternly, Desolate Martial, don't go overboard. Suddenly, Su Zimo recalled Demonist Ji's evaluation of the orthodox path of the immortal sections. If these people wanted to do evil or kill, they had to find some dignified reasons to hide their inner thoughts. They were the most hypocritical. Why? You guys want to attack me? Su Zimo sneered and asked instead. The two Dharma characteristic Tao Lords were speechless and had ugly expressions. The current Tao being Desolate Martial was different from the past. He had a Mahayana patriarch backing him. They were wary and did not dare to act rashly, afraid that their families and sects would incur the wrath of a Mahayana patriarch. "How dare you?" Yuwen Wushuang glared at Su Zimo and growled fiercely. Su Zimo's palm was still above Yuwen Wushuang's head as pitch-black threads spread out from his palm. The black threads coiled around Yuwen Wushuang and sealed his dermic powers. Su Zimo was expressionless as he raised his leg and tapped Yuwen Wushuang's right leg gently. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of bones cracking could be heard, and it was chilling. The bones of Yuwen Wushuang's right leg were shattered by Su Zimo's kick, turning into fingernail-sized shards that remained in his body. There was no way he could recover from such a serious injury unless he had the help of a primordial divine spring. Yuwen Wushuang let out a tragic cry as his face turned pale and his body trembled uncontrollably. At that moment, it was as though he had returned to that rainy night 9 years ago where he saw a lion crawling in the mud bit by bit with its mangled hind legs. Everything seemed to be karma. He suddenly regretted it. If he knew that the lion had such a relationship with Desolate Marshal, he would not have provoked it back then. The Golden Lion watched this scene. The fear towards Yuwen Wushuang in his heart disappeared bit by bit. His eyes lit up once more. "Cuckoo, this is the elder brother I mentioned to you before." The Golden Lion grinned and said in high spirits, "He came here this time round to help me vent my anger." Cuckoo said with a worried expression, "Yuwen Wushuang has a noble status and the Yuwen clan has a strong foundation and strength as well. While your actions are definitely cathartic, elder brother, we're surrounded by strong enemies. Isn't it a little rash for you to do this?" "Rash?" Nianqi shook her head. "This isn't over yet." Chapter 1156, On the Verge. Chapter 1156, On the Verge. It was not only the Yuwen clan. Many Dharma-characteristic Tao lords present had ugly expressions. They felt embarrassed that Su Zimo could do whatever he wanted at the North Region Tao meet. "Desolate Marshal, don't be too arrogant." A Dharma-characteristic Tao lord of Yin Ghost sect said coldly, "This is the North Region Tao meet, and there are Dharma-characteristic Tao lords present. You're not allowed to be insolent here." "Desolate Marshal, release him." The Dharma characteristic of the Yuwen clan hollered. At that moment, Yuwen Wushuang was lying in Su Zimo's footsteps, looking extremely miserable as he howled. One of his palms was crippled by the heaven-slaying sword Qi. Now, one of his legs was crippled as well. Unless he could find the primordial divine spring or cultivate to the conjoint body realm. Otherwise, there was no way he could recover from such a serious injury. His path as a paragon would come to an end as well. All the cultivators looked at Yuwen Wushuang with complex expressions and were filled with emotions. The former number 1 Tao being of the North region was reduced to such a state because of a demon beast, and his dignity was trampled on. "Release him?" Su Zimo sneered coldly. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed Yuwen Wushuang's hair, pulling him up from the ground. "What else do you want?" Yuwen Wushuang had already broken down completely, and his voice was trembling. "Do you remember what you just said?" Su Zimo looked at Yuwen Wushuang and said slowly, "You wanted the 4 of us to kneel to you before you were going to let us go. Did I remember correctly?" Yuwen Wushuang's body shuddered. "Who gave you the guts to ask me to kneel?" Su Zimo's tone was sinister and murderous. Back when he was still immortal, he dared to go against the Golden Core and was unwilling to bend his knees. Right now, he was Tao being Desolate Marshal. 10 years ago, he killed 8 titular disciples and was known as the number 1 Tao being of Tianhuang mainland. No one dared to look down on him. Even Dharma-characteristic Tao lords would not dare to say something like that, let alone avoid reversion like Yuwen Wushuang. In other words, no one in the same cultivation realm could afford to have Desolate Marshal kneel to them. "Since you like making people kneel so much, I'll fulfill your wish." After saying that, Su Zimo suddenly extended his leg and kicked Yuwen Wushuang's other knee. Crack, crack, crack. A tremendous force surged into his knee. Yuwen Wushuang's knee was crushed into dust. That was equivalent to both his legs being crippled. Yuwen Wushuang could not hold on any longer and knelt down with a thud. Ah! He shrieked. The physical and mental torture almost made him faint. Yuwen Wushuang was completely crippled. A thought flashed through the minds of the cultivators when they saw that. There was no sympathy or pity in everyone's hearts. The cultivation world was cruel and unpredictable. Furthermore, Yuwen Wushuang asked for it. If he had retreated obediently during the first transaction, he might have been able to save a leg. However, he still wanted to kill Su Zimo but was captured by the latter. It was only right even if he had to die, let alone lose both his legs. Desolate Marshal Jr., you've gone too far. The Dharma characteristic Tao Lord of the Yuwen clan could not hold it in any longer. He even summoned his Destiny Dermic sword and attacked Su Zimo uncontrollably. Desolate Marshal, don't get cocky. Tao Lord Muyu said coldly, although it's not appropriate for us to attack you, there are thousands of void reversion paragons present. How long can you last if all of them swarm you? What's wrong? Su Zimo sneered. The North Region Dao meat has already fallen to such a state where you guys want to gang up on me shamelessly? Although you're a human, you travel with fiend demons and become sworn siblings with them. You're incomparably savage and are no different from fiend demons. It's only right for us human paragons to kill fiend demons. Dao Lord Bai Ling's words were filled with righteousness. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo seemed to have turned into a heinous fiend demon that killed people like flies. He was not tolerated by the world. Even if all the cultivators ganged up on Su Zimo, they would be backed by a legitimate reason. A series of spirit consciousness fluctuations emanated from the dozens of stone pillars in midair. The Dharma characteristic Tao Lords of the many major clans present were sending voice transmissions to their void reversion paragons, telling them to prepare to attack. Almost all the 10 upper sects, for gentry clans, 2 ancient aristocratic families, and many factions of the North region had some grudges with Su Zimo. Most geniuses from these sects died in the hands of Su Zimo during the battle in the Great Qian ruins. Right now, those Dharma characteristic Tao Lords could not watch Su Zimo do whatever he wanted at the North region Tao meet. Getting a void reversion to make a move was not considered as crossing a major cultivation realm to deal with Su Zimo. Even if the Mahayana Patriarch knew about it, he could not say anything. Upon receiving the order, the paragons glared at Su Zimo with restless gazes. Desolate Marshal's combat strength was indeed powerful. However, they had the advantage in numbers. 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. No matter how strong Desolate Marshal was, could he defend against the encirclement of the paragons? Even though the sword chi was terrifying, it could only target 1 or 2 people. Desolate Marshal's dermic powers would eventually be depleted. Of course, there were some cultivators who secretly withdrew and chose to stand by idly. These people had witnessed Su Zimo's methods in the Dao inheritance ground. In their opinion, there were only 2 options if these people wanted to gang up and kill Desolate Marshal. Either the Dharma characteristic Tao Lords present had to attack, or the 8 dead titular disciples had to revive. Otherwise, the void reversions in Qian Heaven City might not be enough to handle Desolate Marshal. In the crowd, Uncle Zheng said in a low voice, "Desolate Marshal is way too sharp. As the saying goes, steel that is too tough will snap with ease." To think that despite the calamity he experienced 10 years ago, he's still unable to understand that logic. Yulan smiled bitterly without saying anything. She could no longer see through this person. Desolate Marshal, you're cruel and call fiend demons your brothers. You deserve this outcome. Dao Being 100 Ghosts said coldly and was the first to step forward. Desolate Marshal, your combat strength is indeed strong. Dao Being Zimu said in a deep voice, in order to respect you, the North region's twin swords have decided to join forces to fight you. Dao Being Blazing Son of Blaze Columbus Valley stood out with a scorching aura. I heard that you know some fire techniques. It's a good opportunity for me to learn from you. One after another, paragons stood out. Many void reversions had long received orders and were waiting for an opportunity to strike. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was surrounded by a group of cultivators. A murderous aura filled the air. A massive battle was on the verge of breaking out. Night Spirit and Yinqi turned slightly and protected the Golden Lion and Cuckoo within. They surveyed their surroundings with hostile expressions. I think you guys are mistaken about something. Even in the midst of the encirclement, Suzimo's expression was calm. I'm here for 2 matters. The first matter has been resolved. After settling the second matter, I'll leave and won't affect your North Region Dao meet. Dao being 100 Ghosts sneered. He's spreading lies to confuse the masses. Everyone, don't believe him. I'll say it again. The main reason why I'm here is for 2 matters. I don't want to create unnecessary trouble and incur hatred with you guys. Suzimo replied, I did not kill anyone when I attacked earlier on. That is enough to prove my words. Everyone was stunned. They realized that Suzimo was right. He did not kill, nor did the maidservant by his side, Yinqi. Even Yuwen Wushuang did not die. Suzimo changed the topic and said coldly, however, if you guys insist on coming to kill me, don't blame me for starting a massacre and dyeing Qian Heaven City with blood. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.